Good, all right, I'll call the meeting to order. So the meeting of the San Ynez Valley Groundwater Basin Eastern Management, Sustainability Agency on May 28th at 4:00 p.m. Want to take a roll call?
Definitely. Director Hayden,
Here.
Director Hartman,
Here.
Director Merrimeet, here, Director Joes, here, Chair Arona,
Here.
all parties present.
All right, thank you. First order of the agenda is public comments for any non-agenda, non-consent items. Open to the public. Okay, anyone online?
And if you're online, please raise your hand if you'd like to make a public comment. Just a reminder that for the online participants, we have them locked down unless specifically authorized to present or turn on their cameras or speak, and that's just a precautionary measure to avoid Zoom bombing or other things that we've seen happen in other public meetings.
Super, thank you for that reminder. I've seen none. None? Online, okay, or in the room. All right, so I'll close item number 2. And item 3 is the consent agenda. Just a reminder, consent agenda can be approved in one motion, but it doesn't preclude any directors from following for discussion or a different vote. So consent agenda items, information. Or public comment or questions?
I was just gonna make, I guess, a motion to off on the financial statements and warrant list.
Okay.
You can pull that so that we can kind of go through that with our executive director.
Okay. This is the balance of the agenda. Okay. Second.
Second.
Okay, great. I see a motion and a second on item 3A and B. With roll call, or can you just do it? Yeah, so
Aye.
okay, any nays? Okay, go ahead and we'll address items 3C.
I just was hoping that, Dan, you'd kind of walk through the items in this one for us. Just put it in the consent.
All of the financials or just the warrant lists, overage approval
Well,
invoice?
you just quickly go through each item. That's, I mean, we've got time.
Okay, actually, I'd probably like to have our bookkeeper Pam authorized to speak.
Yes.
Pam, could you walk the board through the balance sheet, the profit and loss, and the general ledger reports, and I guess bill payment, and then I can cover the warrant list?
Or I could, do you want to bring them up on the screen?
Probably not necessary. I don't think that those in the room could see them on screen, but it seems like the board has copies that there can view.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. Screen for those that are online, that's probably more legible. Do you want to do that, Pam?
Yeah, let me follow what's in the packet so that we're on the same page real quick. So the first item you would be looking at would be your balance sheet, which is ending 4/30/2026. Is that the document you have in front of you right now?
Yes, balance sheet as of April 30th, 2026.
I'm trying to bring it up. Okay, now I'm there. Okay, so this is all activity for the fiscal period beginning July 1st of 2025 through April 30th of 2026. So this would be all of your cash activity from the bank, We don't have anything in accounts receivable at this point. That would be DWR. Grant invoices that we were expecting, and that did not get posted until the month of May.
Yeah, Pam, the audio is coming in really rough. Is there a way maybe to get closer to the microphone or switch microphones?
I think it's that thing, it's echoing stuff in there.
I think historically it's worked really well.
Greg, you have a specific question, or did you really want to?
If we go through all of them, so felt like haven't met for several months, and it would be good to just get aligned together. But yeah, we're experiencing a difficulty hearing you clearly.
Did you have a specific question on the balance sheet?
I mean, maybe I can walk you through it, Pam, you can help me out if I mischaracterize anything. So on the balance sheet, we have the bank account balance of $316,000. And then we have $950 in prepaid expenses for total assets of $317,000. We have $48,000 of accounts receivable pending. We have liabilities of $449,000 associated with member agency loan contributions. We have retained earnings and unrestricted assets with a total equity of minus $180,000 and a total liabilities and equity of $317,000.
Did you want to go through the profit and loss as well?
Yeah.
On the profit and loss side for this fiscal year to date, we have $428,000 in groundwater extraction fee revenue. We have $85,000 in grant revenue and $101 in interest income, for a total revenue of $513,000. And then on the expense side, we have a total expenses of $444,000. So a net operating income of $69,000, as well as a net income of $69,000. And then on the general ledger, we have a tally of all of the revenues and expenses associated with the different charge codes or chart of accounts in our QuickBooks accounting system. And have provided those for the board's review and overview. And then on the bill payment list, we have the checks or the invoices that were paid for the month of February for a total of $62,000.
Dan, on that, just remind me, what did we pay the CMA for? I know it's some kind of work they did for us, but what was it exactly?
Yeah, the CMA was the lead on the action plan contract with GSI Water Solutions and Stetson Engineers. And so that was the EMA's portion of the costs associated with the action plan. And then on the warrant list, we have one invoice that exceeded the approved budget amount. And that is for out-of-scope hydrogeologic services in support of the monitoring network improvement and expansion project. If the board will recall, we had solicited a proposal from GSI to do an evaluation of existing wells within the EMA and for consideration for potential inclusion in an EMA groundwater monitoring network. The intent of this activity was to make sure that we were using our limited grant resources to construct a new monitoring well in the best way possible. So there was an existing well in an area that we had a data gap, that we could look to include that into our program. And I believe that one of the data gap areas, we were able to identify some existing wells for potential inclusion in that program. And the other data gap area we weren't, and that's the data gap area that we're targeting for the new monitoring well, part of the Prop 68 grant. And so as part of that work, there were out of scope services sort of above and beyond the anticipated level of effort to evaluate that monitoring network and then address comments on the technical memorandum that was prepared to document the findings from that evaluation.
Mary, could I trade places with you? My computers are out, so you have a. Oh, you, do you have any other questions, Brett, or you just wanted to review it?
Yeah, I can't read this at the farm. It's
I
fine.
think this was loaded better enough.
So in terms of the bill payment list, then this is the itemized list that we covered in the summary level over there.
Exactly.
And yes, okay, yeah, no, good. Thank you. Thank you for going through that. Yeah. You're right. We need to have better audio there.
Yeah, we'll get that figured out.
Any other questions then, or discussion needed on the financial statement and warrant list? Okay,
Make a motion to accept that.
best if it comes from you.
Oh, since I separated it.
Yeah.
All right, I make a motion that we accept the item C.
Like,
I don't think you made a motion for the rest of the items, did you?
Yeah, we
We
already
did.
voted on the first two.
Okay, I wasn't sure because you put it all for discussion.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
So we discussed all of the items.
We discussed A and B and we approved it.
Okay,
And now we're just on items 3C. We just made a motion and a second. So we need to vote to approve. Just have all ayes to approve. Any ayes?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that,
Thanks for separating that.
okay, so moving on, item number 4, which is, I'll call it informational, citizen advisory board. It's the citizen advisory group meeting report out. Do we have a spokesperson for the CAT from the last meeting?
CJ was supposed to do it.
Should we ping him and see if he can come back at a later point in the agenda?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has better contact information than I have an
I
email.
can text him.
Okay, thank you.
Just give me 1 second. Try to get that rolling. Gabe, can I ask you, it was his understanding he was a spokesperson this time around?
Yes,
I just don't want to come at him like that.
I know.
Surprise.
He said it was his turn and, it was, yeah.
Is it really about this, CJ?
yeah, we talked about, I sent him the recording and the meeting transcript.
Okay, so can we just move that? I'm gonna suggest we move that. We'll try again after items, to the agenda?
Okay.
Let's go with it. We'll move to after item 5, there's a lot of items on 5, so that should give them enough time. Okay, all right, we'll move on to action items in agenda item number 5. A through H, let's start first with item A. Review and consider approval of the First Amendment to Professional Services Agreement from MLJ Environment for the well registration and reporting platform. Dan, you want to give us a quick readout on that?
Yep, as the board knows, a contract, professional service agreement was executed with MLJ or authorized for execution with MLJ Environmental at our last board meeting in February. Shortly after execution of that document, MLJ Environmental reached out with the desire to bolster that professional services agreement to make it clear that the code underlying the website is intellectual property of MLJ. Staff of the GSA does not believe that the current PSA could read in a manner that would allow for an argument the underlying code is owned by the EMA GSA, but we recommended so that both parties could feel comfortable moving forward with a contractual arrangement with an amendment to the contract to address the concerns from MLJ. And staff does not believe that this additional language is of any consequence or significance to the project services agreement as far as the EMA is concerned.
So question about this, the underlying code, is that being paid for by this agency with our contract? Or do they already have the underlying code developed?
I mean, my understanding is they are providing well registration services for multiple GSAs and including there are GSAs with use of that platform in place already. So I presumably a large portion or if not all of the underlying code was previously developed.
But there will be some modification to interface with our well monitoring program. So, and we're probably paying for that.
Correct. So, yeah, even with the underlying code be developed,
Right.
there needs to be databases and modules and interface developed for the EMA GSA specifically. And so that's what we're paying.
Right, and so my point is that if we're paying for it, then we should have ownership rights to it.
No, sorry, that's not the way it works.
And because we're also feeding data to it as well.
No,
So
no,
we're
no.
providing data through our agency.
We
Yes.
buy a license, not an ownership of the code. And so that's why you have multiple customers using this.
I'm saying, if we are developing that code, then I think we would have ownership rights to it.
Then
Now,
we would
they're
have-
stating that it's not the case.
In the contract that we would have reviewed when we agreed to enter into the contract.
Yeah,
But software is essentially a license. And the source code is usually held in escrow or held by the code developer.
why wasn't this clear then when we discussed this 3 months ago? I don't understand. Why is this coming out to light now?
This was a request of the consultant. It was a surprise to us. We thought we executed a professional services agreement. They wanted this additional protection. I'd like to maybe let Phil jump in, as our legal counsel to speak to this.
Sure. I think it was kind of already considered. I mean, it's a website. They might modify their website a little bit, but the website is their code. We're not having them develop the website and telling them how to develop the website and what we would like in it. So that's their intellectual property. The data that goes into it will remain ours, and they will have to provide that to us if and when we move on. But the actual coding underneath that website, that's their intellectual property.
Right, and as long as they've developed that under their own nickel, or I guess maybe with other agencies, since we're not first, right? We're just taking an existing platform and modifying it for this agency's usage, right? It
Yeah.
would be good if it was clear the boundaries here and the way it was stated it wasn't clear to me, and typically when you're doing contracting with the government, you assert your proprietary rights up front, not after the contract's been already issued. So I understand why they want to do an amendment, but I just want to make it clear, so we understand what we own and they understand what they own. And that's what our legal should be doing.
I think that was the purpose of this added language, was to put a fine point on the difference between the website and the data. So I actually read this language before it found its way into the agenda, just to verify it was, that it was properly structured for data rights and access to the data. In perpetuity is ours. So work for hire is our IP. Data is our ownership, but the underlying code bases, which is the product they basically sell, is theirs and their IP, and we're renting it via a license. That's the structure of the agreement.
Yeah, that was very well stated. I wish it would have been stated out right here.
Well, I guess to say it another way, unless you call out your contract as a work for hire, the intellectual property that comes out of that isn't yours. You have to actually call it to be a work for hire to, so if you wanted to own the code at the EMA, you had to have in the original PSA that it was a work for hire. It's one of the reasons why, we've said in here that this does not affect the current PSA. This really amendment doesn't do anything. There was no way of reading that the previous professional services agreement that this was a work for hire.
So is there a recommendation, Phil, or staff? What do you want us to do here?
We're recommending that, this get approved, based on advice of legal counsel. This does not substantially impact our contractual arrangement with the consultant that was selected. It helps improve the relationship and move this forward, but it's the board. I mean, to my knowledge, this wasn't brought up till afterwards, so I mean, it's board's discretion, but I would recommend we approve it. It's not changing our liabilities, and we've got, as we'll speak to later in the agenda, a lot of work to do along this initiative.
Questions before I go on?
I believe it may have arisen just because we discussed this at length before, but that was our point, in part selecting this contractor was we wanted to own the data. So they may be just trying to explain what they own, but I would move that we accept the amendment.
I'll second it.
Do we need to open for public comment before we take a motion? Let's open for public comment. Any comments from the public in the room? Anyone online?
No hands raised online.
Okay, sorry, we'll go back to, I think I heard a motion and a second.
So we just let them.
Okay, can we go ahead and vote then? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. That's a 5-0. Great. All right, thank you for that, guys. Just a side note, I was texting with CJ, so sorry, I got distracted for a second. I think he will ultimately come around. He forgot and thought this was another time. So hopefully he's back online with us in about 30 minutes. We'll check that. Okay, let's move on to item 5B, which is review and consider approval of First Amendment to Professional Services Agreement with GSI Water Solutions for monitoring network improvement, hydrogeological support and services. Okay, do we need an update from you, Dan, on that?
Yeah, I'd like to walk through it. So as the board knows, we're drilling we have scope to drill 1 deep monitoring well and 2 piezometers in the EMA to address data gaps in our lower aquifer monitoring program, as well as our sort of surface groundwater interactions. And there was a consultant selected to prepare the design and do the construction oversight for the entirety of the Sandy and Nez Basin, including the other management areas. And Geosyntec, who's progressing with that work. However, we feel that GSI Water Solutions, who's been working in this basin for a long time, has an extensive amount of local knowledge and understanding of local hydrologic conditions. And so we thought it was warranted to bring forth a proposal for them to consult in the final design of the monitoring well. That it's, I find it a little interesting, I guess, coming from an engineering background, you know, typically you design something and then you build it, and they're, other than in new design build deliveries, they're sort of separate phases. When you construct a monitoring well or a production well for that matter, you design it to your best of your abilities, but then you actually drill the first hole and you log the aquifer formations, and then you refine the design in real time in the field to give you the best product possible based on that information that you couldn't have had ahead of time because it was hundreds of feet under the ground. And so that effort lends itself to wanting, if you're going to have resources available, they need to be available in that intervening real-time period. And so that's why we thought it would be helpful. This is not work that's in any of GSI's current scope. And so we thought that to allow the EMA GSA to get the best value of the limited grant funding we have for this monitoring well, if we had a contract in place for them to support that design effort, we could get the best product for our management of the basin. And thus, we're recommending the board consider this contract for approval.
Question? Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Geosyntac isn't already supposedly taking care of this.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. They are scoped to do the preliminary design, and they are also scoped to do the design in real time in the field. They have not been working specifically in the EMA in this portion of the basin for the last probably 10 years. I don't know the full extent of GSI's history in here, but we just thought that it's really, if you want to look at it, sort of a peer review approach, is we're getting the best people with the best possible knowledge in place to do this work, and having a couple of heads and hydrogeologists to bounce ideas off of, we thought would add value.
Is there an example? I mean, have you already done this maybe with the WMA or the CMA or another GSA outside of the basin here?
Have we done what?
This particular task that you're proposing?
Well, I've been working only with the EMA on this, right?
Okay,
But no, I've been asked to do this for other areas.
okay.
I have an example. We were working on a project for the city of Morro Bay. They were drilling injection wells. Due to the nature of those wells and the criticality of these resources, we brought in another third-party hydrogeologist that had extensive history of working in that part of the basin to support the lead hydrogeologist, and we got some good input and you know, I think a good product out of that. So I guess I have some history with this approach.
Okay.
Go
Yeah. Tim.
ahead, Tim.
I have seen other areas. You asked a very specific question about the other areas. I have seen places where wells are put in an environment like the location we're considering, where they don't give the answer we're looking for. They're monitoring a shallow aquifer, a little bit of aquifer instead of a deep aquifer. So the big plan the data that I have is to avoid this well seeing the shallow aquifer that's on principal, but instead monitoring the principal aquifer past from this formation. That problem has happened multiple times in my career where I try to design something to only interact with the target that aquifer, the target aquifer. I've seen that in lots and lots of other cases.
Okay, so I think you described it as you'll be there when they're actually drilling the monitoring hole.
And after they get done, we will go there and look at the lithologic materials.
Okay.
And then help them design this thing to avoid problems.
Any other questions?
What kind of problems?
If there's a well just north of here at Midland School, we were considering when we were doing the GSA, when we were picking the representative wells, it's about the same depth. And it's perfectly fine well, but if the water level signature does not look like it's the pass-through formation well, So the problem is, it's not representative, which is one of the characteristics. Not a problem, it's just not serving its very specific purpose. Representing water levels in the pastoral formation, in this data gap area, in only the pastoral formation, not the overlying alluvial. So that's it.
Well, hopefully we picked a good location.
Yeah, and I assume that depth has a lot to do with that, right?
That's right, yeah.
And we're basically saying this is only gonna be at 300 feet.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's an easy problem to solve, we just need to do it right.
okay.
Any questions? Okay, open it up for public comment. Seeing none, any online?
None online.
Okay. Any further discussion? Or I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we accept the First Amendment to the GSI Water Solution.
Second. Okay. Quick vote or any ayes? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any nays? That's a 5-0. Moving on, item C. Review and consider approval of the EMA GSA FY 26-27 budget. Dan, can you walk us through this one?
Yeah, so we're here in what I hear many people call budget season. We're approaching the end of our fiscal year. And so we have it's specifically titled the fiscal year 26-27 EMA GSA budget, but really it's a budget assessment of the current fiscal year that we're operating in 25-26. And so allows us to sort of provide an update to the board on how we're tracking relative to our current budget. And then we use that as kind of the basis for developing the budget for next fiscal year, which is what the specific action item that we have for the board's consideration today is in adopting a budget for next fiscal year. And so just to walk everybody through, we've got our budget table here. The first column is the adopted fiscal year 25-26 budget. The next column is the estimated costs incurred in this fiscal year. So we logged all the costs that we incurred to date when we did this, which was roughly at the end of March. And then we projected costs through the end of June, which is the last quarter for this fiscal year. So it's not just a cost incurred to date, it's a cost incurred to date plus projections to get us through the end of the year. Because we thought that that would be the most useful for the board to see what's our best guess for where we're at and where we're going to end at the end of the fiscal year relative to the current adopted budget. Then the third column is
The end of this year is June 30th, is that correct?
yeah, we're operating on a July 1 to June 30th fiscal year.
Thank you.
And then the third column is the differences that we have between the adopted budget and the estimated budget. And then the fourth column is a proposed budget for next fiscal year. Again, and that's really what this item is considering. So I think what I'll do is just kind of start at the top on this fiscal year and walk through kind of where we're at relative to the budget. And then we can talk about next fiscal year, a budget for consideration. So starting at the top, we have revenue. You know, our adopted budget had $676,000 of projected revenue. Our estimates of actual is actually $860,000 of projected revenue. And so that's higher. The primary reason for that, we did not have an adopted groundwater extraction fee when we adopted last year's budget. So the increases associated with the $455,000 of groundwater extraction fee revenue that we have obtained or anticipate obtaining by the end of this fiscal year. It's not $455,000 higher because we have less grant revenue this year than we were anticipating. And that is because we received an extension on the grant deadline. So we backed up the burn rate so that we can take it at a more measured pace. So we haven't received as much grant reimbursement as we had intended because we have more time to get it done, which is very advantageous for all kinds of reasons that we've talked about. And then if we move down, we have our expenses relative to the budgeted items. The executive director services are projecting to be 193,000 relative to a budget of 150,000. However, there are costs associated with the revenue generating fee program administration that we've taken on as part of those services. So that it is something that should be accounted for when comparing those two line items. On the bookkeeping side, we are showing less costs, but we also, if the board will recall, transferred bookkeeping services to the executive director midway through the budget year. So that's also reflected in the increased executive director services. The audit costs are projected to be lower than budgeted. The insurance is projected to be slightly lower than budgeted, but generally in that time frame. We had some increased miscellaneous costs than we were projected, and so we've adjusted that for next year's budget. On the legal counsel side, we're projecting to have a surplus budget, both in the general and the specialized legal counsel items. We are not showing any anticipated hydrogeologic or technical services here, mainly because a lot of those have been covered by grant items. And so all the grant costs are shown in that Prop 68 grant section. So the upshot of all of that is, with the revenue versus the projected expenses through the end of the year, is a projected surplus of $191,000 for this fiscal year. Then if we move on to next year's budget, we are projecting to have Sigma reimbursements of $271,000. So that's our remaining grant funding that's projected to be available, as well as Sigma extraction fees of $619,000. So that's on the revenue side. And then the expense side, we've made some adjustments to kind of clean up the different line items. So some of the services that the executive director has taken on that were under separate line items have been combined into that line item. So that would be the extraction fee administration and the bookkeeping. And we have budget for audits, insurance, hosting, miscellaneous expenses. And then a key item there, that last expense item under internal operations and expenses, is the member agency payback. So we've included $100,000 in member agency payback as outlined in the cost share agreement. On the legal side, we've used basically kept it the same as last year. That's what that acronym stands for, Sally, same as last year. And then on the technical support services side, actually, one request I would make is to move that $50,000 down to the annual report line item. We were able to cover this year's, or the 2025 annual report as a grant funded item. We will not have that option next year because it'll be after the grant deadline. So I would move that budget down to the annual report. That would be a request for the board to consider in improving adopted budget. The 5-year eval and the GSP amendment, those are grant items. So those costs are covered again in that Prop 68 grant section. We just something to flag, not a decision point for today by any means, but we might need a budget adjustment if the EMA GSA wants to do an amendment to the GSP as part of the 5-year eval. That is not currently in GSI scope. So, but that's something that we'll be talking about and working through over the next 4 to 6 months. So we've got some time to make that decision. Yeah, and then on the grant side, we have those components. The other item we have is then contingencies. So we've got a $75,000 contingency line item in the proposed budget for next fiscal year. And yeah, so that's the proposed budget. I think just a couple of things to note, the projected revenue This happened this year, the board will recall, the projected revenue from the rate study, was higher than the actual revenue that we received this year, and that was for a couple of reasons. One, that the time period where, we, used to project, the average groundwater extraction included some drought years, so there was a higher projected revenue. There was also a methodology change that was incorporated in that time period that kind of changed our estimates. So there's a chance that the projected revenue could come in lower, but that was also something that happened this year, and we were able to manage that to that and still end up with a surplus. And so, yeah, that's what we have put together for, proposed budget for next fiscal year for the board's consideration.
Well, I have some questions. I'll go first. Dan, on something that I think is missing. Where is the software cost for the HJL contract that we just amended?
Yeah, that's great. That's not shown as a separate line item. I think we envisioned that, yeah, would come out of that revenue generating fee, but we're also moving that, so that should be added. Yeah.
But then it doesn't explain, it makes me ask more questions about those two line items and why we would blend them together into the executive director.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good catch. That should be a separate line item for the software costs.
What was that number again?
I think it's 35,000.
Per year, right? Okay, so 30, so.
Well, actually, I think it
Let's
was,
double check that.
yeah.
That changes the annual projection and probably the contingency. While we're at that, the outreach program is at 0. I thought we were, I may just need to be reminded, but it's also an agenda item today, but I didn't see a cost. Are we really extending no expenditure there for that outreach program?
So that was something that we cut when we developed last year's budget and also when we developed the rate. There was a request from the board to trim the budget from the rate study that we used as the purposes of establishing the groundwater extraction fee rate. And so one of the ways that we did that is we cut the outreach program costs. And that's what allowed us to keep the rate as low as we were able to keep it at $39. So that was sort of a decision, you know, legacy decision that the board made, or well, we made, with the adoption of last year's budget. We also cut travel and training, we cut each support, you know, we cut a number of different line items to try to bring the budget number down.
Okay, well, we need to fix the
Yes.
software costs. If you think it's still 35,000.
I need to look into it. I think if I recall, and we're looking this stuff up, but that the initial year was 35,000 and I think subsequent years was 15,000.
So do we pay in this fiscal year? Because it's not in this current budget.
That's what we need to find out. When is that? Because we have not been invoiced for that cost so far to date in this fiscal year. So I'm not exactly sure where that's going to land with respect to the different fiscal years, but we can get that information from MLJ.
But wasn't that going to be covered by the Prop 68 or no?
It was, thank you for that. So yeah, that may show up in the grant costs down below. So it could be buried in there, but I would want to verify that before being able to make a definitive answer.
So okay, let's get those things clarified and maybe recast so we can see the actuals. Because if it's a Prop 68, it takes everything. But if it needs to be, if it's something that we incur as an expense this FY before we close it at the end of June, and then next year's budget as well. Okay. Other questions?
Hey, Dan, you know, on the reimbursement to the member agencies, the $100,000, you feel pretty confident in that?
Great question. I do have some concerns. on that, and primarily related to that revenue projection piece. Again, the revenue projection, like, based on sort of the historical data set we use to establish the rate, and the variability in groundwater extraction that we're seeing, and the fact that we receive presentations on certain crops, specifically vineyards, kind of coming out of service. We may see reductions in groundwater extraction that show associated with those things. The other thing that may lead to a reduction in groundwater extraction is the fact that we have a fee. That's what people say when you talk about conservation, what people to conserve, increase their rates, So I do have concerns on the revenue side that could limit our ability to meet that schedule for paying back the agencies. But I mean, the budget we show here, and obviously we need to make some adjustments for the line items that were called out, does project that, we would have a surplus, a repayment of $100,000 and a contingency. So there is some flexibility in there. That was a situation that occurred this year. Once we had a revenue projection for this fiscal year, but once we got the satellite evapotranspiration data calculated and submitted as part of the tax roll, it was below that projection. And so we noticed this to the board and said, we can adjust for this through, we're not going to have as much contingency. We're going to try to limit costs as best we can. And, I think what we've demonstrated here is that we were able to do that. We were able to adjust to a lower revenue number than was predicted in the rate study through cost control. And, we just don't have as much of a buffer. The other sort of knob we have to turn here is the building of a reserve. The rate study incorporated that we were going to build a reserve every year for 5 years. And then at that point, then the board could decide, do we need to keep increasing the rates if we have a stable reserve and a stable operating income? That may take longer to build, or the board may need to make a decision. Does it want to put potentially surplus funds towards building that reserve, or put it towards payback according to the schedule of the cost share agreement? So I think those are the options we have ahead of us. But yeah, there is uncertainty around being able to make that payback.
Okay, well, with that, knowing that, so we do have some flexibility in this budget. I'm looking at, 75,000 contingency, which, we're already seeing may get hit a little bit. And then you had a surplus of estimate of 67,000. So, in the perfect world, everything worked out, we'd have almost close to $140,000 to start building our reserve. And so that'd be good. Do we need to have a line for reserve money going in? Or just do we need a footnote saying anything from the contingency left over? And
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I assume, a couple of ways you could account for that. Yeah, we could have a specific line item reserve, and then you could still have a projected surplus or deficit. Yeah.
Net positive, we should run close to net zero, so you should have a line item for reserves.
Yeah, we can add that.
It's also public facing, like what we're doing with that is to withhold it or reserve it.
And then if we do have this money available that starts paying back, we're just gonna have it set equally by the four, divided by 4 for the 4 member agencies to pay it back.
Yeah, that's the way it was structured.
Yeah, did we all pay the same amount?
We don't.
Okay.
Any other
Oh,
questions?
here's one thing, just observing this, your bottom line, 824,000. And if you take away the grant money, and that's assuming that all of the grant work's done, we won't have grant money anymore. our budget would be close to $500,000. And that's what we were looking for when we set our rates, so that looks good right there.
It's a good validator.
That's all I got.
Anything else?
It seems like you got a few changes to make and then you're gonna see it up again, but we're not gonna wait till July, are we there?
Well, let's take public comment, then we should probably discuss about what we do actually with this. Any public comment? See none, any online, Charlotte?
Not online.
All right, thank you. So bringing it back, that's the discussion I think we should have. What we do it is if we, next meeting is July, if we agree.
And we have to adopt it.
And that'll be passed.
That's the
We'll be in
point.
this new fiscal year. How would you like us to proceed? I think, I heard someone ask if we could do an ad hoc meeting. We can call a separate meeting if we think we need it.
Yeah, there's another item that, you know, we've got a little work to do on. That was a question for Phil. Phil, if we wanted to have another meeting before our next regularly scheduled meeting in July, could we call not just a special meeting? We know we can do that, but could we call a special virtual meeting? Is
You
that
want-
allowed?
You want a quorum in one location, or are you wanting a quorum not in one location?
A quorum in a virtual setting.
Okay, so a complete virtual meeting. They've changed the rules this year on that. I will need to look into them to make sure all the facts, because some of the facts kick in, like how far everybody's apart. Like one, you can't be less than 20 miles apart, or you actually have to be in the same building. So I need to look at it and get back to you.
I mean, here's another idea. I mean, we could adopt this budget with the changes, or our direct staff make changes and bring it back next meeting in July, and you can modify it at any point. So you'd have an adopted budget, and you get another chance to look at it and change it at that point before we got more than 1 month into the fiscal year.
I would like to know the exact numbers, if we could do that. And then I would say we know what numbers are going to get plugged in, and then we can.
Yeah, so I can give you several of the numbers. So the year one MLJ cost was $33,071. The year two MLJ cost is $15,000.
Do you know when year one is due? Date.
My understanding is it's a time and materials contract. So, well, no, it's not a time. It's a software and service contract. I think maybe the year one may have a time and materials element. I mean, because there are hourly
That's
rates.
just the piece of it.
Yeah.
The implementation.
The implementation piece, and so they're working on it now. We know that we have not received our first invoice. I don't have a great answer for when that full 33,000 is gonna hit. I suspect it's gonna extend into next fiscal year, but I don't know. Without knowing where they're currently at with billing, I don't have a huge estimate. I mean, I think I could say, I mean, with the projected surplus for this year of 191,000, even if all of it hit this fiscal year, we still would have budget
I
available.
was just gonna say that, and even if none of it hit in this current FY, and we had to take 48,000 plus whatever the implementation costs were, we would probably still be okay. So I would be okay in accepting the budget with a ratification when we see the final version in July. I'm so concerned with that, all right?
So can we outline the direction that we have? Just bring out the reserve as a special line item, bring out not the audit,
The software line item.
Yeah, and there was one other.
And then just to clarify those numbers, we're accepting them as placeholders, but we will see the final adjustment in the July.
That'll be on the agenda and we can adopt the budget, the final budget, so.
Readopt.
Right,
Yeah.
this is the draft final.
Yeah,
Draft final. So can we get a motion on that since Joan outlined what we're
Don't we
doing?
all put our heads together?
Motion.
You did a great job. Would you like to make the motion?
Charlotte, do you have what we said?
So we'd like to, move the hydrogeological engineering budget down to the fiscal year 2026-27 annual, water year 2026-27 annual report. And we'd like to, include a budget for the MLJ software, costs for the well registration program and, include a line item for reserve in the budget.
Was there something else from the executive director function that we wanted called separated out? I guess the bookkeeping already is.
Yeah, we've kind of already, we adjusted that in next year.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and we'll take all of that in a motion.
Yeah, so moved.
Thanks so much. There's something. I'll second it. Thank you, we all. Then we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any nays? I think we heard all 5-0. That motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're moving on to, agenda item 5D. Review and consider approval of the easement from monitoring, well with the Chamberlin Ranch.
Yeah, so a little background here, I need to provide, this is something we've been actively working on for a number of months. And we're still working on sort of getting to the final throes of an agreement with all parties. So, and this is something that we talked about with the CAG at, last month. So, the data gap area that was identified for, where a new monitoring well would be most useful is just say roughly in the Chamberlin Ranch portion of the basin. We've investigated multiple locations in that area for siting a monitoring well, both on private property within Chamberlin Ranch, but also within what was originally thought to be public right of way. But upon pretty extensive further evaluation, going back to road deeds in the 1970s, other things, it was identified that the deed that the county has for that road may be limited to a road only and may not extend itself to all other utilities. And so based on those things and the potential need to have an agreement with the county and the underlying property owner, which, because that, even where the road is, it's still, to my understanding, owned by Chamberlin Ranch. There's just an easement or something for a road there. We thought it would be simpler to just have a single agreement with the property owner. So we've been negotiating with the property owner, and there are sort of two specific terms for the board's consideration. And again, we brought these to the CAG as well. Those two terms are, one, property owner would like the authority on whether or not the GSA can do water quality sampling at the monitoring well. This is intended to be a groundwater level monitoring well at its core, and we don't have any plans or budget or funding or a monitoring program for water quality. And so the property owner wanted sort of the discretion to approve any water quality sampling that would occur at that well, should the GSA request to do so. And then the other one was a request for reimbursement of $3,000 to cover legal fees associated with review of the easement agreement with the GSA. And
Up to.
And so that is where we are at. What we included in your agenda packet here today is an initial draft of the easement agreement that does incorporate the water quality limitation. It doesn't describe the $3,000. We thought that that would be done through some sort of board direction or other things. So it's just explicitly in this easement document. We've actually shared this document with legal counsel from Chamberlin Ranch. They came back with pretty extensive edits to the agreement yesterday, I believe, so we had not had time for the lawyers to get together to bring back all those edits, and we didn't want to bring all those edits to the board and ask you to make a decision with this red line document today. So, so we have a couple of options, basically available to us, I think at this point. One of the options is we just punt till July and we bring this back and we've had the chance, the lawyers to go back and forth and figure it out. I'm a little concerned about that, with respect to the schedule for the overall Prop 68 grant implementation. Like, we're not waiting on this easement today. Today, we're actually waiting on DWR to finish their review of the TM that describes all the wells we're gonna put in. But we anticipate that approval coming shortly. Even at that point, we wouldn't be waiting on the easement. We'd be waiting on the finalization of the bid package and the release of the bid solicitation to hire the driller. So there's time that still needs to occur. But if we got the notification tomorrow and we got agreement on the bid package, we could have a driller potentially ready, to award at the end of July, and so we'd be waiting on the easement. So it's tight. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of details here, but just letting you know, there's some uncertainty around waiting. If we wait for 2 months, whether or not it's gonna impact our schedule. So that's one option. The other option is we could authorize GSA legal counsel and the executive director to negotiate with the property owner to an agreement that is substantially no different than what's here. I mean, there could be some language changes that don't, and Phil, feel free to jump in with the proper terminology.
Sure. The request would be to leave it to council and the executive officer to approve an agreement in a form that they believe is subsequently what you have in front of you. I will say this, there were a lot of changes to the easement agreement that we got from their legal counsel. I don't think there's a lot of disagreement between the two legal counsels on what the agreement needs to say. The difference is our agreement has an exhibit where they can change in the future and anytime they want, actually, pretty much overnight, the approach that we get to this well site. He's locking that down in the easement itself rather than an exhibit that can be changed in the future. That's something that me and him can work out really quickly, I believe.
Okay. I understand the timing constraint, but to approve a legal agreement in draft form is a certain kind of ask, and then to approve an agreement in draft form that you told us has substantial red lines is another ask. I would want to hear from the lawyer that the red lines are not material and have been reviewed and would most likely be accepted. Otherwise, I would feel pretty uncomfortable approving.
Yeah, so I think
There's substantial language in here, which actually on my first read, it seemed fine. So and it was comprehensive. Doesn't shock me that something got redlined, but it looks like it was well thought out, so it does make me concerned that there's significant change.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think there's much disagreement between the attorneys and the actual language. The approach is how you put the language in the easement. He's placing it up in the easement itself rather than an appendix. And the template that we've done for others and this one is you use the appendix. So where he doesn't want us to have access to a fenced in area, we're completely fine with that. But you call that out in the appendix and you point to the appendix as to where we can and cannot go. And he's got it moved up into the body of the text. That's why I say I don't think we'll have much of a disagreement at all. We've just got to decide how the language will look.
Okay, to me, that's not redlining, that's just reorganizing the agreement.
That's pretty much what I would say we're going to be doing, but you're seeing something with a lot of blood on it in a red line.
But we don't see that I mean, that's.
I very, it looks like you had a copy of it, you could, I mean, not that
We'll
it's,
still look at it, yeah.
yeah, I,
Did you have any concern? What was he doing?
Concern with,
Agreeing something that is in draft form. Or red line. And not agreed to yet.
was it, I don't know. I don't know if I can even, vote on it, there might be a conflict of interest for me to
Yeah.
have any discussion of it. I mean, I'll say that Chamberlain wants to work with, the GSA and really is looking forward to it, but there was a lot of delays that were not from our side, let's just say. So this is all come very quickly. We were given this to give to our legal last week. And of course, there was a 3-day. So I'm sorry that they just received this yesterday, but you know, oftentimes legals don't get around.
Sounds like it's still a work in progress,
so another option is we punt this today. And if it becomes a critical path item before the July meeting, we call a special meeting. Or I coordinate with Elizabeth to decide whether we want to have a special meeting to avoid that happening. There are a number of steps with other things that we need to do before this becomes a critical path.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of risk there, but I think we can mitigate it if we just kind of have a commitment to try to make ourselves available for a special meeting, should we.
That seems nodding on that, and we, so.
Yeah, I just have a few questions about this, and first of all, thanks to the Chamberlin Ranch for allowing this. It's not the easiest thing, we know to find places for monitoring wells. So I just wanted to be clear, the underlying land for the road itself is your land, and the government just has an easement over your land. That's what you found. So that easement doesn't extend to something beyond the road, so that's why we need to do this on your property. And if I've read this, the term is as long as the well lasts, or the term of this easement?
Yeah,
Or when it does no longer provides.
Put it in the termination because it's not needed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of vague how long it lasts. And I just wonder if that needs to be defined in any greater detail.
if we could put a more defined term in there, if that would make the board more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, is it in perpetuity? Is it 10 years? Is it 50 years? I mean, I don't know how long a well lasts or how long it might be needed. So I just think it's unclear. And what expectations are important.
I think from the Chamberlain side, it's in perpetuity until, but I don't know what you all would feel is more comfortable in that.
I think as long as it's valuable, providing good data, we would want to have.
Yeah,
Maybe we have to put some language in there that ties to the useful life or the usefulness of that asset we're monitoring.
And I think the grant requires similar language, needs to have easement or their property acquisition sufficient to provide for the useful life of the asset.
okay, well,
For monitoring well, it's decades.
Will be declared, right? It's
Yeah,
no
we
longer
can be
useful,
more
it's no longer
explicit.
functioning and
yeah, just so the heirs of the Chamberlains know,
Yes,
and we,
yes.
the heirs to us, understand what was agreed to here.
Yeah. Okay,
And then it,
that's good feedback, you got that?
and a few other, so we're the 3,000, up to 3,000 for legal fees. And what are we paying for the easement itself?
Nothing for the easement.
Yeah. That is really generous.
Great.
Just wanted to get that on the record. And we should emphasize that, and that is the benefit of, I think, the real benefit of, the cooperative participation, right?
So I think those are my main questions.
Any other comments or questions or directions now that we are going to postpone this? Do we need a vote on that, or are we giving you direction?
I think direction fine.
Any other,
Can you vote on if, the board would be willing to repay up to $3,000 or not? Is that not a specific?
Yeah, because that doesn't have to be included in the easement, so I think that I would move, and you can't vote, but I would that we would pay up to $3,000 for legal fees to review the easement from the chamber.
And I'll second that.
ready to do it, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
We need to take a public.
Oh, I'm sorry, do we, because we just introduced a new topic. Okay, sorry, we do need a public comment on the, introduction of the willingness to pay up to $3,000 in legal fee reimbursement. Any public comment on that?
Yes, there is one public comment online.
Thank you.
Bill, feel free to unmute.
Oh, thank you all. This is Bill Bulow. I guess the one question I had, and I was a little unclear, Dan, what you said about the water quality sampling, is that something that is going to be allowed or is going to be precluded in the future if the GSA decided they needed to collect a sample? Can you just describe that again?
Yeah, so one of the requests was that water quality would only be allowed upon approval of the property owner. So it's not, no water quality can ever be done. It's just that if the GSA wants to do water quality, it would need to get approval from the property owner. And I believe that language is in the agreement that's being shown today.
There's a specific sentence that says, without prior written approval, so.
Yeah. So yeah, that I guess is part of the discussion. Maybe that would be, it would be definitely helpful to know from staff if that was acceptable to the board before we spend more time on this.
It seems reasonable to me.
I thought it was reasonable. It does introduce the possibility of further negotiation. But what I'm taking from this document is a underlying cooperative agreement, so it doesn't concern me. Any other, okay.
We can vote again.
Do we need to? I think we already did.
You have to do a roll call on this, because
No, we can vote on the 3,000.
Yeah, and that question was separate.
That question is exact. Okay, so, any other public comment, Charlotte? On the 3,000, up to 3,000 in reimbursement approval. Okay. And so can we vote, all in favor, say aye? Aye. And no nays. Thanks, Randy, for abstaining recused. Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to item 5B, review and consider approval of resolution adopting the EMA GSA bylaws. Once again, I'm looking at our bylaws.
So, yeah, we've seen these before. We have seen these exact bylaws before. There are no changes from what was shown at the last meeting, plus the direction that was provided at that last meeting. And that specific direction is described in the staff report. And so we have a proposed set of bylaws in here, just again, to orientate people. The text that's not italicized is the due text that, would be adopted as part of the bylaws. The text that is italicized is text that has been pulled straight from the JPA agreement. And the reason that's in there is it helps provide a more a complete document, I guess. And so we have these bylaws for the board's consideration, and, staff recommendation would be, well, the review and consider approval, but I guess we would recommend approval. It would be helpful from staff perspective, A, to not have to keep bringing the sign back, but B, also have an adopted set of bylaws that we could, work through.
Any questions or comments from the board directors?
yeah, I've got one. And it's just, the wording is hard to understand and follow. It's that under Article 7, 2A. Okay, it's like say Just understanding the way it's written, if there's a conflict between board members, the chair or executive director regarding whether an item should be placed on the agenda, then the item will be placed on the agenda. So if there's a conflict, it gets put on the agenda. So I'm looking at that and I go, that's kind of a weird way to do things, but that puts our executive director who we're trying to keep him efficient, is gonna have to prepare a staff work on an agenda item that may or may not be accepted to be able to be discussed during the meeting. That's seems awkward to me and a waste of our executive director's time. And then also you're talking here, the board member, the chair, you're starting to get in that Brown Act area, too many people outside of a public meeting. That's kind of curious. And I don't know, is this gonna expose us to PRA? I don't know, it just seems, it seems hard to
Can I make a suggestion on that?
complication.
I see the complication and I'd love to get these ratified. So I'm gonna make a suggestion.
Okay,
Because I remember talking about this and adding this to the adjustment and in the language. And that the chair and the director would agree on agenda items, and if a board member wanted to add something, that we agreed that would be settled between the board member making the suggestion and the chair. However, we didn't necessarily say that the resolution of conflict with me would automatically go back to the agenda. So I don't remember that part of the discussion, but what I would say, we already have a mechanism to deal with that in our typical agendas, which is at the end of the meetings, we get to make a suggestion on future agenda items, and presumably we all agree. So I would say we make that change, that if there is no agreement, it gets another opportunity to be brought back under our standard agenda procedures. And that's how we resolve, not putting it by default on the agenda. We put it back to the
So basically,
future agenda items.
you give the chair the prerogative of saying no first, but if you're not acceptive of that, you can come back through the
Exactly.
meeting.
It goes back to our traditional procedural opportunity to address it. So it's not a hard no. It gives you another opportunity on the next round of the meeting, and the directors will get a chance to hear and consent, right? That is a worthy topic.
So we have specific
I would
language.
just say we strike that last item. What is it? What is it? 7A?
so
7.2.
If I may, board, I think we should read 7A completely, because I believe it says what you're contemplating. So if there's a conflict regarding whether an item should be placed on the agenda, it'll be placed on the agenda, and at the beginning of the meeting, the board will consider whether to move forward with the subject item. And then a majority vote will decide that. So in other words, if there's a conflict, a board member can come in and say, I would like this item placed on the agenda, just like they could in any other point in time. And if they had a sufficient number of other board members supporting that, it would be placed on the agenda. So I think it gets what you want without delaying
Let's read
a board meeting in between.
So in that first sentence, the last few words says, then the item will be placed on the agenda,
Yes. So
right? And at the meeting,
Mhm.
oh, I see, okay.
So, to kind of just ball game this out, Joe wants X on the agenda. Mary says no. Joe gets it on the agenda. It sets on the agenda at the beginning so that you could discuss it if people wanted to discuss it. The board then decides whether or not it gets removed from the agenda at the beginning of the meeting and
So
whether or not
the-
it's discussed.
It's a backdoor. There is no consent. So it looks like it's been normalized on the agenda. There's been no public review. If there's conflict, it gets put on the agenda. That's what this language says. It's not that there's, that it
Yes,
gets viewed before it gets to go back on the agenda.
it will be viewed, and to put it another way, somebody could come in and motion to put anything on the agenda whenever they wanted to at the next meeting. I guess really your question is how much of it do you want on the agenda when there's conflict, and how much of it do you want to wait a month? Because that's really what it comes down to. If there's a disagreement, somebody wants something on the agenda, there's a disagreement, it's not put on the agenda. At the meeting, the board member has the right to ask for something to be placed on the agenda at the next meeting, and if they get the votes, it goes on.
I guess the sticking point I'm having is probably what you're having. It says it gets puts on the agenda rather than getting reviewed, right, for a future agenda item. So
It's a timing issue, I think, yeah, and whether it formally gets agendized.
A way to put something on the agenda that doesn't have consent or public review.
It would allow things to get on the agenda that the board as a whole didn't approve. But then would have the option to not agendize during the meeting, so yeah, I mean, it's time.
I can't think of a scenario where you would de facto default something on the agenda if we hadn't already reviewed it in public or there wasn't consent. And you know, if it's really red hot, I would think the chair would say, would agree, and there would be no conflict. But we're talking about something that there is conflict. That's the presumption. And you're landing it on the agenda without a resolution. You're asking, the agenda suggests, the formal agenda suggests it's been published and reviewed and consented to, but it hasn't, right? It's been done behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, I mean, there's provisions in here, and we sort of have a standard practice where the executive director is setting an agenda and that hasn't gone through a public review process. It does go through a board collaboration process. But to your point, I mean, yes, we're talking a very specific, potentially controversial item that's also red hot, right? That can't wait till the next meeting to then be proposed for a subsequent meeting, which at this point
If I
is.
was the chair, that would be the first
Three to
question.
4 months.
Can this wait?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
If it can wait, you use the last item on our agenda to gain consensus.
And generally, if we have a red hot topic that we really need to address, we have special meetings that we go after those things and
More to the point, the executive director would be bringing it as the agenda item to the chair, not a director, right?
yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I wouldn't see this specific guy coming up very often, if ever.
I think the idea behind it at one point, and I don't understand the legals of what it's saying here, is that sometimes there might be 4 board members that don't want something, yet a 5th one might really need it on there for there to be some discussion and consideration. So I think that has kind of come up a few times, but I'm not arguing.
Yeah, I think this is trying to address that scenario and offer more transparency for the process here.
Yeah, I mean, just from a little history, I mean, the reason this came out really, we had a disagreement between a board member and the chair on what they wanted on the agenda, and we had no formal guidelines. And so, that was resolved by requesting that the item be not agendized at that meeting, but brought up at that next meeting for a future agenda. And I think ultimately that worked out, but you know, it highlighted that not having a formal procedure made it a more difficult and awkward position. I mean, there is a point we said, you know, and we got an item later in the agenda about the level of effort on the executive director side. Agendizing a whole bunch of things that aren't actually then going to be agendized does take time and cost money. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So if you agendize something, you have to go to work at it.
and to a certain level, we need to understand it. To a certain level, we may need to write a staff report. I mean, there's definitely a level of effort associated with that.
I think there's a mechanism to deal with both conflict and to deal with, you know, a director, single issue. But that is done in public and it's done in a way that you persuade everybody that this is important enough, that we need to agendize it. Usually, I rarely see this, you know, sort of like, we should be, once it's discussed, we have an opportunity to discuss it and then,
Yeah,
it's to,
I hear what you're saying. My only concern is that we don't meet monthly. We meet every other month or sometimes every 3 months. So, it might be better to have the language that we have here, so you kind of cover that scenario. You've got something and you don't want to wait 2 months before it gets agendized and one member wants to bring it forward. It still gets the review of the entire board. You know, any action has to result with at least 3 board members supporting the agenda or topic in order to be on the agenda. So,
the concern I have with that is to put something on the agenda, Dan has to agendize, it's got to provide the material and the information and be prepared to review it or represent it. So it does mean work. And then you have the opportunity for, if the default when there's conflict is to agendize it, you have the real opportunity for runaway agendas. Could have 4 other directors asking for a topic because we have met every other month. And they all want something that isn't being discussed right now on the agenda.
speculate on different.
I think it really may boil down to whether we do it up front and agendize it, or do you take it at the end of the meeting and you get consensus? That's procedurally what's in place today.
We have at the end of the meeting, any new items to be discussed for the next meeting. That's in every one of our agendas.
It's procedurally in our agenda. Is that not workable, or does anyone feel that doesn't work?
I think I'm okay with the language as is. I don't want to make any changes. 7.2 and 7.2A.
Would you be agreeable just to strike the, and then the item will be placed on the agenda? Or not? We could move item 8 up to the, oh, no, it's the end of the meeting. We would agree to what we're going to spend time on.
But
If I'm,
not the place.
Big old.
Yeah, is that Bill?
yeah, I guess
ahead.
let me be sort of clear here. What this does is it allows a process for somebody to have something that others have disagreed with being on the agenda, to be on the agenda so that they could have it voted on at that meeting, because it would be out there for the public process of the agenda. You know, the staff report, all that would be done. If you don't do this, then what you have is you have sort of the default situation where something isn't put on the agenda, a board member would like it on the agenda. They have to come in and then request from other board members through a motion, second, and vote to have it put on a future agenda. This allows it to be moved forward faster. But it also has an escape hatch in it where it might be on the agenda, but all the board members decide, or quorum of the board decides that they don't want to address that item, then it won't be addressed. Now, there is a downside to this. I guess it's a downside. There is another complication to it, however you want to look at it. Some might not see it as a downside. if it's on the agenda, the public gets to comment on it, period. So even if the decision is whether or not you move forward with it on the agenda, the public gets to comment on it.
Problem with that.
Well, it sounds like the way you just described it, Bill, it's got me more concerned because you've given a single director an avenue to ignore consensus support.
Yes, I would say it's already built into the law, though. To be honest with you, I mean, if a director wanted to come in with something that others disagree with and bring members of the public in to talk about it and public comment or whatever, they can do that. So, yeah, you are correct, but there's ways to already kind of
Can they
uncan
do
that.
that? A function of an agenda item or elsewhere in our procedures?
So let's say there was an item that one board member really wanted, others didn't want to discuss it. The people from public comment comes in, it's not on the agenda, the public can comment as much as they wish. Board member can ask to get a vote to have it put on the agenda after public comment or during board member comments. And you're then facing the issue of whether it goes on the agenda. The only thing that this does is in a situation where you have the disagreement about whether something goes on the agenda and will be discussed at this meeting, for example, it would be placed on there in a hybrid state where if the rest of the board wants to discuss it, it can become a full item. Now,
Okay,
the reality of that is it's kind of already a full item at that point.
new terminology, you said it's hybrid and it's up for discussion, but if that is different than being agendized. So the language needs to be adjusted.
The tentative agenda item is what I think I heard you say.
But see, that's the point. You can't have anything that's a tentative agendized item. If it's on the agenda, the public can comment on it. So if the question is, are we going to consider this as a board? The public is going to get to talk about your consideration of it. So it is fully agendized at that point. Whether or not there's much discussion or whether or not it gets removed from further consideration, you can't stop the public from commenting at that point. So it is an agendized item at that point. What this language. Go ahead.
I mean, it's, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, all agenda items are hybridized, right? I mean, the board can start any agenda and say, we want to remove this item from the agenda. We have to take public comment. So it's not anything different, but it is fully agendized at that point.
Yep, and public gets to fully comment on it. In other words, you can't put something on the agenda and remove it from the agenda and stop public comment. You can tell them make their comment during public comment instead of the agenda item, but that's it. It's out. It's open for public comment. The only thing that this provision is doing is it's allowing somebody who would like something to come forward before the board, for the board to consider, to not have to wait for one additional board meeting where they motion and have others agree to put it on the future agenda. It's attempting to shorten that period. And I wasn't involved in drafting this provision, so I'm just reading it and telling you what the underlying result of it is.
Well, okay, maybe you can recommend how to sharpen that language, because even the last sentence, it seems circular, because then the majority vote will be needed to add the item to the agenda for consideration by the board. So it's on the agenda, but we're voting to put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
You could, looking at it, you could put a couple words at the end of the second sentence. At the beginning of the meeting, the board will consider whether to move forward with the subject item at that meeting or a future meeting.
And a majority vote would still be needed to add the item to the agenda for consideration by the board. That's still the last
Yes.
sentence.
Yes, you'd always need that. You know, if you don't have a majority of the board to put an item on the agenda, it doesn't go on the agenda. Majority of the board could remove anything from the agenda. It's the same sort of process.
Usually, we always have that option, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is trying to sort of like somebody was, and I didn't draft it, but somebody was trying to get themselves in that position where you can have a disagreement, still get an item lined up so that it could be at this board meeting decided, and still give consideration to all of the facts that, you know, a majority can remove an item if they want to, a majority can place a item on the agenda if they want to. But if a majority today place an item on the agenda, we can't discuss it unless it's an emergency item until the next board meeting.
So maybe could we recommend, would you feel more comfortable if we recommended just to sharpen this language a bit and maybe put some context about timing into this item? So we have more. I like the idea of thinking about our heirs, thinking about what this language was really meant to mean or what it was meant to address. That's a question to you.
However you'd like me to do it. I mean, I think I might change that one suggestion with the subject item at this meeting or a future meeting, however you would like that. This language is actually trying to get you to put something where there's been disagreement so it can be voted on at this meeting.
I could be more comfortable with at this meeting or future meeting, then it forces a discussion and it forces some forum participation.
And it gives our staff some time, because, you know, I've looked at his workload and where it's at, and these meetings eat a lot of money out, okay? And so that's all I was saying. I mean, I just brought it up. I'm not like gonna die on this, but, you know, I'm gonna run this thing efficiently and keep us moving.
All right, so
I'd like to just adopt what we've got here and then, see how it goes, you know, 3 months from now, we get into a situation that is your worst case scenario. Then I guess we could go back and revisit the bylaws and make a change to them, but in the interest of time, I think we should move forward with this.
I prefer not to have to revisit the bylaws once again, so let's just give it,
What is everybody else think?
that.
There is one minor thing. I'm sorry, I didn't pick this up earlier. It refers to Santa Barbara, which is also a city throughout the document. It doesn't refer to the county of Santa Barbara. One director representing Santa Barbara, in 7-1, for example. 7 PU. So I think somebody just needs to do a search and.
That unfortunately that's a extraction from the JPA. So addressing that is a whole nother can of worms.
Okay. I guess we know what it means, but it is confusing.
Yeah.
I guess I could make it even more confusing because I believe all the references you're referring to are to the Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Okay, that's right, Matt. Okay, well,
Does it say that in the GSA at all? Do you know?
Matt, Tom, he's sure.
It's in the definitions in the JPA, but the definition didn't make it into this document.
Yeah.
So section 2 has the definitions. It doesn't define Santa Barbara as Santa Barbara County Water Agency, but it is defined in JPA.
Okay, so that change would clarify it.
Correct.
That and addition of to the definition.
You know, we could add a definition of Santa Barbara here and shall be referenced to the Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Thank you. I think that would be a good thing to do in the bylaws.
And so everybody's clear, you can adopt these today, and these are changed by resolution, so we can come back with any amendments to it or manipulations you would like at the next board meeting with a simple resolution changing them. This is really just a reference document that you keep all of your policies in one easy to reference document. There's nothing particular about adopting all in one fell swoop. We can adopt them today, make the changes you'd like, add the definition, manipulate 7.2 however we would like.
Okay, is there any other comment, anything else that you have concern or issue with Kathy? Okay, let's open it for public comment. Go ahead, Matt.
I'll just say, just noticing that the other agencies, you might want to define them as well, it's variously referred to as ID1 or, improvement district number 1 without a definition. It looks like that's because of, again, cut and pasting from the JPA. But the definitions we're not cut and paste. It's just something to check if you're checking.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? In the room? Charlotte, any online?
No hands are raised online.
Okay, great. Thank you. So any other discussion or suggested action, motion?
Make the motion that we approve the bylaws as presented and discussed thoroughly tonight.
I would prefer to amend that, but I'd amend it to adjust the two changes we just discussed tonight, which is I like the idea of adding the agency definitions. Quick change, but important. Clarity for the entire document and to insert some language in the 7.2A.
Yeah.
That just
Addresses timing.
puts context that time consideration is the main driver. Yeah. For that activity.
Okay.
And I'll
accept that.
request lawyers to make that suggestion.
Right.
Okay.
I'll accept that.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's fine. I'll just move on. Thank you, everyone. I am still on 5. Review and consider approval of the resolution authorizing groundwater extraction fee charges to be collected as the tax roll. Another good one.
Item, yes, 5F. So this is a very important item and for really 2 reasons. One, we need a resolution authorizing the GSA to place charges on the county tax roll. Our experience working through the first year of administering groundwater extraction fees, that the county tax roll is by far and away a way more efficient way of collecting fees than direct billing. We got the experience of doing both. The majority of the charges go through the tax roll. However, there are certain direct billed entities, primarily water systems, and a lot more questions and staff time associated with sending out direct bills and answering questions and actually, really good feedback. So strongly recommend that we adopt a resolution putting on the tax roll. The other piece of this is adoption of the rate increase to the groundwater extraction fee. This is something that is board discretion, but is also strongly recommended that the board adopt because of a number of reasons. One, as we described earlier, we potentially may experience a revenue shortfall compared to the projections in the rate study, like we saw this year. 2, we have significant liabilities to pay back from the member agency loans. 3, we're trying to build reserves so that we can have some sort of buffer in case we see the more longer term reduction or unanticipated expenses. And then 4, we still have the monitoring well component of the Prop 68 grant cost uncertainty. So the single largest line item in the Prop 68 grant, I think, is the construction cost for the monitoring well. And while we have estimates of what we think that would cost that were used in the development of the original grant application. We've got updated estimates from the hydrogeo consultant. There still is uncertainty on whether the actual bids that we get will fall within those estimates. So having additional funding, either in contingency or reserve, to cover that, provides much more flexibility in the agency's ability to drill the monitoring well, improve its monitoring network, and be responsive to DWR that we're sustainably, we're working towards implementation of this GSP. So with those two considerations, I would recommend the board adopt this resolution to place the groundwater extraction fee charges on tax roll, as well as adopt the proposed rate for the groundwater extraction fee of $41.50 for fiscal year 26-27.
Okay, thank you. Questions from comments, anything? Very good. I just make a comment on the 41, the rate increase, that this was already completed, we did the rate studies and forecasted, if you will, or projected. Hopefully, that was well publicized. Okay. No questions? Public comment?
Yeah, I'm gonna figure out the extraction fees are already on the tax rolls. If I understanding it out, everyone's gonna be billed by the tax rolls. There will be no direct billing.
Sorry, yeah, and that, good clarification. Charges for the majority of pumpers are already on the tax roll. The exception is largely, I think or even exclusively public water systems where, maybe there's one well on one parcel, but is providing water to multiple parcels. And so in that case, doesn't make sense to charge. So they would still be direct billed those systems, but then ag parcels and others would be property taxed.
For example, my water system is not public, it's small state system.
Yeah, I guess, extending down to state smalls and small water systems.
Okay,
Yeah,
still being
direct bill. Yeah.
Any other public comment? Online?
No comments on
All right, I'll bring it back then. Any discussion?
And we adopt the resolution and the fee increase.
and second.
First and seconded, and all in favor, say aye. Aye. And that's a 5-0, no, okay, anything's great. Moving on. 5G, review and consider approval of the reimbursement to Walker and Lantis for groundwater extraction fee overpayment associated with misreported production.
Yeah, so this one, actually, upon reflection, we probably didn't need to bring the board for your approval. We have, as the executive director, the authority to address an appeal, and if we agree, make the adjustment. But given that this was our first appeal, we thought it warranted bringing it to the board, and we can sort of talk about how that process is gonna work. So there was an extraction fee, and in this case, it was a direct bill. But that was submitted to a water system. And upon receipt of that bill, the water system identified that they had incorrectly read and reported their groundwater extraction usage. And I think in this case, it went to the conservation district and then to us, because they fall within the conservation district's boundary. We requested justification for this adjustment, like, okay, well, can you prove to us that they misreported? And so they sent us photos of their meter reads for the year. We were able to check the math and confirm that, that they had miscalculated by an order of magnitude. And therefore, in our opinion, we're warranted a credit. So we approve credit, but we, also thought maybe the board should see this. So the board approves, we would issue that credit. That credit would become in the form of a check from the GSA back to, well, actually, have they paid? They did pay. Oh, even better. Yeah, so they're following the system. Yeah, so they paid and we would issue a credit back to them for that adjustment.
This isn't the first time this has happened.
I'm sure that other agencies have experience with this. It was an interesting, this and other are interesting previews of some of the challenges that we are gonna face with a metering and reporting program. You know, there's a bunch of numbers there, some are white, some are black, some are red. You need to know how to read them to accurately understand what you're actually producing and to report. And so I'm sure this won't be the last time either, but.
Glad we get the chance, I guess, to be aware of it, but I think we should do the right thing and approve the credit.
Yeah, sorry, just the other piece of that. So if staff, as the appeal portion of the resolution is written, if we disagree, then the property owner or the producer, how would they have the option to appeal directly to the board, and the board would ultimately make a decision. But because we're both in agreement in the future, we can process these without taking the board's time.
Okay.
Any comments? Public comment?
The map isn't mapping, it's actually 30 acre feet, so.
Like a round off there.
Yeah, I think there's a rounding issue there. Yeah, and yeah, if we had another decimal point on the booster pump column. Yeah, that was another thing that was identified. Well, sorry, I like to geek out on water systems, but they were reporting all the well production, which goes to a tank, which then goes to a booster pump, which then goes to the system. And part of the problem is they were counting all the wells and the booster pumps, but it's the same water that goes to the well, the tank, the booster. So it was, you know, additionally, there was the issue of double counting because there were 2 meters in the system. I think that might have been on our end initially, but yeah. We got it.
Any other public comment? Online, Charlotte, we okay?
No comments online.
I move we grant the reimbursement.
Yep.
Second.
Right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any nays? Okay, that's a 5-vote pass. I'm gonna make a procedural suggestion. I'm getting hand signals from our CAG member. Do you need to leave, Jay?
Make this report.
Yes.
Okay, so is there any objection to one more agenda? In the CAG?
We're gonna lose them. Yeah.
We told them to get in here and now we're gonna lose them. So let's go ahead and revert back to agenda item number 4 and bring today for the CAG readout.
My apologies, Madam Chair, commission members. I've been jet setting from Stanbrook. This was one of the most convivial CAG meetings that we've had. No drama, not too much excitement. We listened to all 4 providers' presentations on the software package beautifully. And after the conclusion of it, after asking many questions and providing our favors, we concluded that really the body that needs to decide the propriety of which one is indeed the end users. So its staff is going to be utilizing the product, accessing the data, and coming back and reporting to you that we feel and felt that while we appreciate the opportunity to suggest and comment, that at the end of the day, the most important decision would be made by staff, which one would be best. Number 2, which one provides the appropriate level of information to facilitate a report to you. Third, however, in a fairly long discussion about the fact of the 4, would all of them provide data as owned by you? In essence, at the end of the day, if the product remains proprietary and the data isn't yours, then we found that we would probably be picking from the one that provided the data that you can take ownership. An additional consideration that was had was we've got 2 other management areas, and they've all had to conclude and pick a provider as well. How well will the data work and complement if you want to look at aggregate value data? And we'd be all looking at the same product when we are all making a report, or you are all making a report to the Water Resources Board. Because if you all have three different providers, or two different or one different, we weren't quite sure how that selection was gonna be made for the others. But at a certain point, some of us in the ag community would be hoping that at some point you would be able to stand up and say, after water years like 22, 23, and 24, that there was a cumulative beneficial, negative, or non-impact on the aquifer base. So we're hopeful that if you're all getting similarly created product, that you can come to similarly created outcomes and assessments. So, interested in seeing that go forward. Otherwise, one other item that did come up is, for a while in our early discussions, we saw that the presentation made by the Conservation District was somehow different on the basis of data, which they assured us it was not. So again, we wanted to have apples versus apples, and not apples to oranges. So it was spirited, but at the end, we gave our input of what we liked and didn't like, but defer to staff and to you. It isn't really what we like, it's what you guys like. And fundamentally, that also, one other consideration, we would hope that the selection was as simple and easy to explain to individual pumpers as they come on board, that the product be able to be in English, in essence, easy to understand for them. They're going to be an additional input. That's my report.
Any questions? Should we ask questions of Stephen? Is Stephen willing to take some?
Oh, shoot.
Any questions for CJ? Or about the meeting? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for being available.
Yes, thanks for letting us chase you down.
Didn't know you could find me.
All right, thank you for that. So back on the default order of agenda, we're back to item 5H. 5H. Consider approval of the Fourth Amendment to Professional Services Agreement with Confluence Engineering Solutions for Executive Director Support Services.
So I think,
Yeah,
I think I'm kicking this one off, so our executive director isn't. This is obviously to amendment to their professional services agreement. It's to cover some, we'll call them cost overruns and unexpected costs that Dan can explain more than me and would have a much better understanding of them. But I guess that's it for kicking it off. Dan, you want to move from there?
Yeah, so we've had let's say a high level of effort fiscal year with a number of initiatives that have required a lot of staff time. We've had special meetings, we've had impromptu meetings, we've had to do extensive staff reporting, coordination with legal counsel, all the things that just go into preparing the agenda packets and facilitating these meetings and coordinating the numerous initiatives on the back end for the grant implementation. And that has caused our level of effort to exceed our budget for currently approved budget for the fiscal year. There were sort of three items that we wanted to highlight. One was there was an extensive amount of time and energy spent on ag director representation at staff level meetings that came through multiple meetings, right? There was quite a bit of time spent on the evaluation and selection of the well registration and metering and reporting platform. And then there has been an extensive amount of time spent on researching and obtaining the easements for the monitoring wells and piezometers. That's not it. Obviously, there were a number of other high level initiatives. The bylaws, I think, probably came to the board at least 3 times this fiscal year, for example. And so those things largely have contributed to our costs being higher this year. We did a breakdown of the executive director invoice costs in the staff report. It breaks down what we're considering just sort of executive director costs, and then what are costs that have been incurred associated with the different grant components. Just to help sort of break that up for the board's understanding. And then so to cover that portion of this, there's a proposal for a contract amendment of $75,000. I would say, and we've looked at the latest numbers that we have for this quarter. Costs have come down. One of the things I think we're at right around 15,000 for the month of March. So if you extrapolate that to the end of the quarter, that would only really result in a $45,000 rough amendment. So the 75,000 is conservative. That was based on the burn rate that we had for the previous quarters this year. If you looked back at Q1, Q2, and Q3, that's what the level of effort has been required of us. So I'd say that estimate is conservative. And then just the other piece of this, we didn't want to just bring problems. We also wanted to bring something for the board's consideration in terms of solution. As we talked about in the budget, there is revenue or a surplus projected and available to be able to cover those additional executive director costs should the board choose to approve them. Even with the amendment, there would still be the $191,000 in potential surplus this fiscal year. So that budget projection at the end of this fiscal year incorporated this overage and potential authorization. And then the other piece of this item is that our contract expires at the end of this fiscal year. And so included in the amendment for the board's consideration is renewal of the executive director services contract for fiscal year 26-27 at the amount that was included in the budget for executive director services in the proposed and adopted budget.
Questions and comments?
I understand that you've had to do more work, and I think, we up here don't always appreciate when we ask you to do things, what that means in terms of our budget. But I think it would be important to me to know this ahead of time, not almost at the, we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. Now, this is a projection, and you say it may be less than what you're saying. But is there any way you can flag this kind of thing or ahead of time?
Yeah, no.
That's the part that bothers me.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I mean, we track this on a monthly basis. We really noticed the issue occurring at the end of this last quarter, with the high level of effort associated with the January and February meetings with the focus on the metering extraction platform. So we kind of flagged it at that point. So say, mid-April, is when it really became apparent. And we haven't had a meeting since then. So that was part of the problem. We canceled the April meeting. And so that sort of timing is contributed to a certain extent to the sort of, I think, the surprise that I'm hearing. But also we can do a better job forecasting. We knew we were burning at a rate that was higher than our budget was going to allow through the end of the fiscal year. We thought that things were going to slow down at some point once we installed the ag directors, once we had adopted this well extraction metering platform and I think we're starting to see that. That's where the burn rate for the month of April has actually started to come down. But there's just been a large number of items that we've been requested to respond to, and this board has a very high attention to detail, and so we want to do it right, and we do want to do it thoroughly, so that it's something you can feel comfortable approving, and that has taken a higher level of effort we anticipated this, but I do apologize for the lack of the for noticing, and so that's something we can work on. We do share with the chair with our invoices, sort of where we're at relative to date, but we're not necessarily forecasting. And so that's something that we can expand upon our noticing that, you know, at this rate, we project that we may be over so that it's not completely retroactive.
I had a similar reaction. So noticing is an interesting concept, especially like maybe we fall back to what our procurement policies are, right? Because it's a big number too. It's well over 50,000, which we would have been engaged if we were purchasing something, which technically we are. So, I mean, why aren't we using that procedure to, instead of just sort of defaulting it into the budget, I guess would be my reaction. And more to the point, and we get notice, and you know it's heading in that direction, and you're making an assumption that, well, you're gonna stop drawing down on this acceleration of consumption. That I think we need to hear. I would say, I want to see something before it. Yeah, it builds up to a big number.
If I may, I think I work for government. I think all of us are on government boards. That's why we're here, except for Mary. And so we have an assumption that it's not a private consultant that's billing time. We expect people to stay later, you know, to ultimately meet our standards. So I think it's a tricky thing to give feedback to us that we're causing you to, but I think that's the kind of discipline or the kind of feedback we may need, that this will be, you know, how many extra hours, or, I mean, I just put that on the table because I think that that's partly what's driving this, is that we are engaged, we are pushing and seeing things again and again. And that in normal government is fine. People work overtime, it's expected. But here, it's those hours are racking up.
That's a message for us. Yeah.
Well, or how do we think about that?
Get better. Yeah.
I mean, I can point to an example. We are an executive director in another management area in this basin, and our fees are much lower. The level of effort they meet quarterly. The meetings are shorter. The agenda's tight. To be fair, they are not wrestling with a lot of the same issues that this portion of the basin has. They do not have a very large undistricted issue, they are not implementing and metering and reporting platform, they do not have an ag. So it's not completely apples to apples, but there is a higher level of effort that we're seeing.
I'm sorry. So can you remind me, I'm gonna say this, so this is gonna be $75,000 more than what we already have, agreed to. But it's gonna be up to $75,000, because you still bill us, let's say hourly.
It's time and materials.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I assume that this next fiscal year is gonna also take a lot of time, and it seems like the next big thing is getting the well registration and metering and all that going. And then in my mind's eye, it seems like things are gonna hopefully just taper off, and then we can go back down, right? This is 75,000 for this year. But then that doesn't necessarily mean that the next year and the next year and the next year we're agreeing to that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I would envision this one. I mean, the other component that's gonna change is the grant is gonna be done next year. I mean, if you look at the cost,
Less complexity demand.
40% of our costs this year have all been grant focused and related. And, you know, and a lot of that is grant reimbursed or full. But there's a high level of effort with the easement requirements and overseeing the various components.
So, but you make a really good point, Mary, because we're in, you know, the spike period, level of effort, and it should trail down, right? It should, ideally. But is that in the comparative, would you say that's true for the other EMAs? Are they going to experience a surge, or because of their difference in complexity, they still won't experience any cost spike?
I would say that I would anticipate less of a variation unless they take on major initiatives, like if they decide to adopt a registration year reporting program and want to go through a consultant selection evaluation process, and then that could change. But the EMA specifically comparatively has taken on a lot more initiatives in these first couple of years of, you know, of the JPA formation.
Good for us.
And you've, there are a variety of reasons why you've had to do that.
Dan, okay. You spent $75,000 more in work.
So Claire, we have not spent $75,000.
Okay.
That's
Your
projection. If we stayed at the old burn rate for this next quarter, it would be, we are projecting it's actually lower than that, and we also haven't spent it because we are only, you know, a few months into it.
So it could be less. Now that hasn't been paid out of 25-26 budget, correct? You haven't been paid for it yet. Okay, so that money, whatever it is gonna come out of 26-27's budget, correct?
No, not necessarily. So the projection for 25-26, where we showed the projected surplus of 191,000, that incorporates the maximum potential overage that is included in this amendment.
Okay, so yeah.
So it would still, if the full amount were to come out of this year's budget, we would still estimate that there's a surplus of 191,000.
Okay. And that surplus came from?
Expenses being less than budgeted and a number of other categories, and then also groundwater extraction fee revenue coming in that wasn't included in the adopted budget.
And then, okay, so at the end of this fiscal year, like it's that, it'll get paid out that 191 or whatever.
Yeah. Not even part of the 191. That's already factored into the 191. So
Oh, it's already back to it. Okay, wow. Okay, and so. Okay, so that's all already factored in. And then you're projecting for 26-27, you're gonna need, it's gonna have to come up some. We don't know if it's 75,000 or whatever it actually.
we're not projecting that level of effort for next year. And I mean, that may be naive, but I mean, the reality is we have tackled a number of significant issues. We went through our first year of groundwater extraction fee administration this year. We've adopted our well registration reporting platform. We've come up with a solution for staff level representation meetings. We've completed a number of the grant tasks. And so, you know, we're for next year's budget, we just included what was in the rate study budget, with some minor tweaks like we talked about for the bookkeeping and the extraction fee administration. But I mean, what I would commit to is, we can do a better job of forecasting and notifying the board.
Okay, so, and I think I've heard Joan and Elizabeth, is that you need to give us some heads up. Would it be good if we had amount that we're gonna have to agree upon, that it's gonna bounce up to wherever this is, there's a not to exceed limit?
And you have that now. Our current contract is capped at this amount, and that's why, yeah, it's a board discretion on whether to
Right.
grant additional.
What remind us what that is? Did we exceed it?
As of the March invoices, including the March invoice, we exceeded it by 13,000. But that has not been paid because that requires board authorization, which is why this is an item in front of the board.
It would be appreciated if that was even pointed out in the report or because I didn't appreciate that. It makes me underscore it again. If we're going to exceed the cap on the contract, we need to be notified. Okay, any other questions? Comments? Suggestions? All right, I'm gonna open it to public comment. Any comments? Go ahead, please.
Just that we use sometimes when we're using contractors, is that we ask them to, when they submit their invoices, they estimate percent, spend, they show percent spent and also percent complete. And so if you're getting that monthly or even bi-monthly, it's very explicit for the board to see where they are. So just something to consider.
Does that exist in your contracts or is something you require in reporting in your contracts or is
It
it?
may not be in the contract, but for example, when we hire GSI, we prepare the GSP, big $22 million project. I worked with Tim and Jeff and said, we need monthly to know exactly where you are. Make sure you're not spending over.
Yeah, it's a great point. So if you guys are tracking it monthly, we should see it monthly too, right? It's just a transparency thing. It doesn't mean percent complete doesn't apply to everything, but a monthly.
Caveat that. That's tough because as they're working on it, you guys are sometimes actually asking for new tasks. But I think there just needs to be more consideration, hey, this is this is gonna increase my scope. That kind of discussion, I think, can be facilitated with clear numbers.
And to your point, it would also give us an appreciation if we're piling on, right? It just gives us a sense for we're overly ambitious. Sit down. Comment?
Well, I just wanted to say that percent spent is meaningless without percent complete.
Yeah.
So, and as far as percent complete goes, if work isn't done when it was planned to be done, then there's going to be additional costs. So an estimate of what it will be costing to complete is a good source of, increasing the cost on the project.
Good point. And
My former life used to track CPI and SPI, cost performance index, and that's how yeah, schedule performance.
And now the EAC, which is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do those specifications exist in your contracts or it was methodology you used?
We would specify that when we were letting contracts and some of our customers would, those are estimates as well.
Good input. Any other comments in the room?
Did you, yeah, I used to teach. Did you work for the government?
Any other public comment? All right, online?
Nothing online.
All right. Any other further discussion or questions or action? I think what I'm hearing is maybe we call it action, Dan, is that we formalize the reporting, a monthly reporting and notice. If you believe it's heading to exceed point.
Yeah, and we can do that. One of the things, the challenge with these types of services is there isn't a defined scope. And so it's hard to estimate a percent complete of the project. But what we can do is we know how much of the year has been completed and what, if you had an average burn rate, what your projected spend would be and where you are relative to the amount of time that has passed under the contract for these types of
You
services.
just identify it because you already are assessing it that way inside Confluence, right? So
Yeah.
you know, hey, this looks
Yeah, we're exceeding our burn rate according to this contract, and as it's told, you're always optimistic, oh, it's going to take less time, and it doesn't. So, yeah, so we can easily provide costs incurred to date relative to projected burn rate based off time of the length of completed time of the contract.
Okay,
It's 32.
Yeah,
so given some clear direction, go ahead, Marie.
So if you want that monthly, but we meet maybe every other month or every third month, how would you suggest that Dan gets that to you?
We'd see 2-month report.
Yeah, when we meet,
Okay,
We'd see.
but like, to what he was saying is that you realized this in April, but we didn't have an April meeting, so I'm just not quite.
so one thing that we've done in another management area in a basin near here, we put the financial reports up on the website monthly. And so we don't have to have a meeting to put the financial information out there so people can see where we're at relative to costs. And so if that would be helpful, we can do that for the EMA as well. You know, it was one of the things that wasn't much of a problem when we were meeting every month and, you know, but now that we're starting to spread things out, we canceled a meeting, like it would help with more real-time financial transparency.
I like that offer. So now I start directing the notice reporting and publicizing it on the website. Or our review, constant review, super. Any other? Okay, we can have that.
Is that gonna cost us more?
Yes, well,
And then it's another one. Any other, now take a motion on their team motion, anybody?
so we need a motion to approve the 75 or up to 75,000.
75,000, and which they put in the, you put in this agreement, correct? Dan?
It's all included in the resolution, the amendment, so
The amendment, and it includes the extension of the contract, correct?
that's.
Okay, so.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any nays? It's a 5-0, thank you. All right, and we're moving on to informational items on the agenda. Item 6A, Glenn.
Yeah, so I get to turn this one over to Tim, thankfully. Tim's gonna give us a presentation on spring 2026 groundwater.
That's where I can see the screen. Chairs, and directors, I'm just gonna give you a quick update on what happened in the spring measurement in March. It's started by, Matt's colleague, Matt's Brigado, which measured all the wells and representative wells, I don't know, summarize them. Summarize what happened relative to the prior year. Then, through the period, since signal was mid-law, so 2015. Now, take 2015 before we get there with a grain of salt. Not really relevant here, it's just there for that. So we're going to do this pretty quickly. So we're summarizing the groundwater elevations in this. 2026 has been a very wet year. So far, the water year coming will likely be above normal. Remember, this water year type includes the prior water year that's been part of this year's rain, plus part of last year's rain and calculation. It is made based on the way DWR tells us to do the calculation. So wet year, factors are all about rainfall at the airport. So really, look at the show.
So wait, go back. So the top, I'm fixated on that upper right-hand column where you've got wet for 2024 is 21, but then it's also 21 in 2026 and it's above normal. And that's because you look 1 year in arrear.
Yeah.
And say that you were below normal, so that.
Right, so the way the calculation works is it considers 60% of this year and 40% of the prior year to gather antecedent conditions. So that the 33 inches in 2023 is wet, but the 21 inches in 2024, which is the same amount we have now, right, was wet because of the antecedent conditions from the year before. So now in 2026, we're at the same amount of rain as 2024, but the prior year was a dry year. So it's not just each year is considered by itself. It's always considered in the context of what happened the prior year. It's a strange calculation, but following it's good.
It's just odd, because like you say you're critical, which I think is maybe worse than dry, but you got more. But because the year before was dry, it's just, I think they need to redo their definitions.
Yeah, it's just each one being heavily influenced by the one another. So a critical year is such because the year before was also dry. It's cumulative, right? It's a 1 year, maybe put it another price, it's a 2 year rolling average. Look back at the average consideration, so. Yeah. It's counterintuitive from this table's format, but it's
Yeah, I think.
hydrogeologically, it seems to make sense to me because the last year's rainfall affects what's going on in the ground this year.
Well, we're arbitrarily imposing an annual definition on something that's not annual.
It considers the prior year because it makes sense. I think that they're looking at 1 year in particular is myopic. And longer periods that we present in the plan make more sense, long periods of drought, periods of wet. So
Yeah, well, we measure annually though, and at least we tabulate it annually, so that's what you're reporting. I mean, you have the data though on the left. I think I'm just saying that get wrapped around the axle on the water year types when you can look at the actual data, and that's better.
Director Mayor, in order from the driest to the wettest, just for the record, critical is the driest, followed by dry, below normal, above normal.
Okay.
And they follow the colors, the redder, the worse, the bluer, the better.
And, is the definition of the 60% plus 40% of the prior year, is that just the water type or are the numbers, the inches also?
It's not intuitive, it's calculated. Since there's interest in this, I'll go into it a little deeper. We take, I think it's 60% of this year and 40% of last year, and then we calculate that value. And then that's given an index, which is compared to, supposed to say, the prior 29 years. Those are all ranked. Figure out the percentiles of those that are used to calculate the things. It's absolutely not intuitive. But that's how everyone wants us to do it for annual reporting only. I would suggest that for the periodic evaluation, we will represent this in order of cyclic cycles, kind of pull back, pull out, and look at it in a broader perspective.
So is the water year, the same as the rain year? Like rain years start in September, right, or October? October first, and same with the water year.
That's what water is, yeah.
Okay.
Rain year, water is the exact same.
Okay, thank you.
It's not fiscal year, it's not calendar year, it's something else.
Thank you.
Anything else? Great. So relative to the prior spring, water levels have risen on average. What's shown here are the state well numbers for the 15 wells that are in the Paso Robles formation in a representative monitoring network, with handy dandy arrows to show whether the water levels in the wells have gone up or down and by how much. So this way here, almost all of them have gone up, and the average of that rise is 5 feet. One well went down a little bit. Likewise, in the Carriaga sand wells on the west side of the EMA, water levels have risen. One well, a couple wells vary quite a bit, as you can see, with one rising. Sorry, with one rising as much as 76 feet, and one time is twice a year. So that can vary quite a bit. On average, one level's during this period of time out. Okay. 18 feet before we go. It's worthy of noting that the DWR has suggested that we start to consider fall conditions instead of spring conditions, but these are spring values, so we're looking at spring to spring conditions. The two wells that went down are shown here in the right boxes, and then everything else went. Really up on this one, town. And then others, a little bit strange off axis, I think very similar to the sides, but they're green and tan boxes. In the way that we're used to seeing, how many of these wells had water elevations that were below the minimum threshold triggers? Recall that those, if that value becomes over 50%, then undesirable results could occur. So during the spring, the values went down from, in the past Rivers formation, from 46% down to 23%. But one of those rows, that makes sense. And likewise, in the Cariaca sand, went from 22% to none. None of the wells were below the minimum thresholds in Cariaca sand. Now, this is the arbitrary period from, since Sigma was made law, water levels in the Paso formation have gone down on average by 10 feet. I didn't include a 2018 to 20 to now period. I'm sorry to say, but some of them have gone down quite a bit. Some have risen. The distribution of those I'll show in the next, in 2 more slides. We'll do the same thing from
That's a result of the drought years that we were having, you know, if you're going back to 2015 there. I mean, if you aggregate over a different period, you would come up with maybe improvement too.
Yeah, it's only a regulatorily important period.
Yeah.
It's not a climactic milestone.
But right now, the trend is recharging based on 3 or 4 wet winters. And so, you know, if we continue to get rain this today, it's going to add to that, but.
Right. Similar. And similar story, but much less muted, much more muted in the Cariaca sands, and there's no slight decline since 2015. In the wells, the locations of those wells, and you can see quite a bit of variability. There's one well rising 27 feet, some dropping by 11, 19, 16 feet. So, the next slide is a map where the wells have fallen since 2015. Let me end the presentation. We're not going to talk about all of these we want. The sound part, but
Any questions for Tim or comments? Thank you very much for sharing the data. Thank you. So we had predicted it was raining at the end of May. Okay, moving on. Last item. 60, Proposition 68 grant, and the EMA GSA initiatives updates.
Yeah, I'll keep the grant updates relatively brief. We've covered a number of the related items. But I guess there are some. So component 2, we've completed the demonstration project, meaning we've collected the data on metered extraction, electrical records, and satellite evapotranspiration for representative sites in the EMA. And so now we have the data and we can analyze the difference between those different groundwater extraction estimating methodologies. I think it's less consequential for the EMA because we've also adopted a metering and reporting ordinance. So we kind of know what direction we're headed, but still interesting information to have, good science. And then, yeah, component 3, long done the rate study, obviously Prop 218 process. Component 4, ongoing activities are related to the 5-year eval. And so we've been actively coordinating with GSI on the completion of that 5-year eval. We have at this point drafts of chapters 1 through 3 that are going to be distributed at a staff level for review, and then ultimately then to the CAG and to the board. And then subsequently we'll have the remaining chapters later this summer for the board's consideration. I think one thing to note that we've been talking with the GSI team and collaborating is on the schedule is, and I guess I've briefly mentioned this before, leaving the potential open for the board to consider a GSP amendment as part of the 5-year evaluation process. So as it's structured, the GSP was adopted, 5 years later, you need to complete an evaluation. As part of that evaluation, you can consider amending your GSP for a variety of reasons. The most likely reason would be to respond to a recommended corrective action that DWR sent to you in response to your GSP and the approval of it. And so we have 7 RCAs, don't quote me on that, but a number of RCAs were working on the strategy, and GSI is diligently working on the responses to those. And we'll also be providing recommendations to the board on whether or not we think addressing those RCAs should come in the form of an amendment to the groundwater sustainability plan. And then ultimately it'll be the board's decision on whether or not you want to amend the plan. And so we've structured a schedule around you getting that information and then being able to make the decision on whether or not to amend the plan before the 90-day notice period that you have to release that you're going to amend your groundwater sustainability plan. There's very structured requirements for amending a GSP. And so we want to give the board full flexibility to make that decision and be able to do that as part of the 5-year eval.
So for the 7 corrective actions, when are we gonna see all that, since that has to be pacing before the.
Yeah.
And the plan, the GSP, that's a big deal, and, you know, you open up a new can of worms with the approvers, if you go on a, you know, go off on a tangent, which you don't wanna do, you wanna maintain that approval status that we have with them.
Yes, I believe that's the August.
So the board will get that August 6th. The staff, the executive director will get that July 16th. And then it'll go to the CAG August 6th. And it takes go to the board September 10th. So it'll be in the public when it goes to the CAG. It'll come to the board after that, it's all incorporated.
So yeah, late summer, fall, when that's really gonna ramp up. I think we've got some good ideas. You know, Tim's brought forth for, you know, where we might want to consider amendment, where we might not. So, you know, we're working through that process and we're excited, you know, share what we think, at least with you, for your consideration, for that time. And I'm starting to hear rumors that 5-year evals are getting reviewed by DWR and comments coming out. I don't know if anybody else has seen those, but those would be informative to see how DWR is responding to other 5-year evals for basins throughout the state. And predominantly, presumably critically overdraft basins that are 2 years ahead of us on all this schedule.
Lessons learned there, definitely.
Yeah.
So you're saying that we'll look at that review, the 5-year, that gives a heads up if we need to do any modification.
I think it'll be an indicator for the whole industry on how DWR is approaching these 5-year evaluations. Yeah, and you know, we have the benefit, hopefully, of seeing what DWR is doing before we have to complete ours.
Well, the leading question then would be, is there a sister basin that we have that is 2 years ahead of us that has a similar approved GSP?
They were critical.
Yeah, I mean, they were all critically overdraft, so hopefully they're not sisters.
They're not sisters. No, I was looking for a.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we'll have to
like
look to
us.
see if there's another basin that was maybe in a more similar situation to us.
Bill has his hand raised online.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
do.
can just assure everybody that DWR is in fact now reviewing 5-year updates in critically overdrafted basins. Just last week, I wrote a response letter to them where they had asked me questions a year after we submitted one. So they are currently in process. They'll probably take the full 2 years like they did last time.
Are they doing that publicly, Phil, or is it not public communications with critical
Well,
overdraft?
it's all a public record. So like they asked us to make some additional additional comments on stuff that has occurred since we submitted the update a year ago, and we responded to that. So they are currently looking at the Indian Wells Valley GSA update as we speak.
Is there another public comment or?
Well, this is, so I'm based on also they're 2 years ahead. We haven't had formal response yet, but similarly, there have been question and answers, a letter, not a review, but asking some questions from DWR staff brought to the board, some potential responses. And so there's been some back and forth, but it hasn't been the formal comments on the 5-year eval. And there, we actually did a major GSP amendment, basically rewrote the GSP. So it's a little bit different there.
Okay, so we may not get formal 5-year eval reviews, but we are at least getting insight of what questions we may have.
Matt, so that letter you see, and they're communicating with, are they just giving you some heads up of what they're seeing so you guys can adjust? Is that what you think it's about?
There's a lot of interpretation. They're mainly asking questions. They're asking for clarification on what we did. So if they asked us, why did you set minimum thresholds here? We would then explain, we did it this way. Gives us a hint, maybe they don't like how we did it, or maybe they just need to be able to justify it, but it hasn't been, you did this wrong, please fix it.
Okay, how many items did they give you to look at? A dozen?
5 to 10, something.
Wow, okay. Some work that could be coming. Okay, thanks, Matt.
Did you have something, Tim?
Yeah, a couple of things to come on. I suggest that the DWR's responses, the timing have all been within the 2-year mark, right? But the quantity of the comments has varied widely, right? In some basins, they have these really short letters. You're rejected. Really short letter, you're approved. Ours are really, really long letter, you're approved, but you have to do all these things, so the answers are very widely. That's what you think. Another is kind of a note of encouragement. In 2 other basins we're working in, the 5-year evals haven't been awarded yet. One was just awarded to actually start the work in May. Another one is starting in June, and they're on the same schedule as us. So, well, we're not as far ahead as the other parts of the basin, but we're not in the back of the miracle.
Good input. Any other comments?
So, that was component 4, component 5, we talked about the wells quite a bit already. But I did want to spend a little time on component 2. So included in your agenda packet was the work plan for the DWR facilitation support services. So I think I've talked with you verbally about this, but I don't know if we formally presented the work plan from DWR so the services that will be provided, funded by DWR to support our well registration and our well metering and reporting ordinance implementation. And then we have representatives from the consultant team from Stantec that will be providing those services, just to present a couple of slides for you today and introduce themselves and start talking about what they're working on and what we see coming forth in the next literally month to kick off this effort.
Hi,
Ellie?
good evening. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Directors, thank you for the opportunity to give you a briefing on the activities related to engagement and implementation of the ordinances. And our facilitation support services program is funded by the Department of Water Resources. The scope was provided in conjunction with EMA. So we are here to help make well registration a reality and engage with the public in collaboration with EMA and the other contractor, MLJ. So briefly, just wanted to introduce myself, Eileen Takata, and I'll be your lead facilitator. I'm also an integrated water management specialist. My deputy, Emily Ng, And I will be the two people that you meet at the upcoming public workshops if you're able to make them. And we have a senior advisor, Craig Moyle, who he was on earlier, but unfortunately couldn't stay. But he has significant experience as a Stantec in working with a few dozen GSAs over the years. So this is kind of the crux of the presentation. And Charlotte, I did minor tweaks to this PowerPoint from the earlier one I gave you. So I apologize if the board members, you're holding a version that maybe has a few changes to it, but otherwise it's the same. So just to aid workflow, we developed a series of work packages, and that it all hinges around MLJ's launch of the web portal, tentatively scheduled right now for July 1st. So that 60-day well registration period per ordinance, 2025-01 is tentatively scheduled to run through the months of July and August. And so you can see here on the left, the bundled packages A through D have to do with well registration, while the last three have to do with the metering and reporting. And the column in the middle are basically the deliverables. I'll go through a few of them in more detail. I'll show you basically rough mock-ups, so you have a visual to at least go by. And you can see the red text is the signal, the start of the 60-day per the ordinance section 2A, where it says, once you receive the well registration form, that's the start of the 60-day period. So just wanted to flag that one, and I'll show you a mock-up of one. The orange boxes, the dark ones, are of course for the public meetings related to well registration in the first portion of our contract, and then later on spread out throughout the rest of the contract, which goes until the end of next year, the support workshops for well metering and reporting. So here's just kind of a visual of an existing North Fort Kings well registration website that MLJ has developed. So we will be updating EMA's current well registration landing page. You have a very clear spot for it. That's great. It's going to be easy to find, and we'll make it easy to enter the portal. They call it watermark. So if I say watermark, that's code for the well registration portal. On this website, we'll also add public meeting notices, FAQs, resources like training material or other watermark related trainings. So there'll be a lot of information added to the current landing page. We're also updating the graphic visual identity for the well registration program, so stay tuned for that. The graphic look will probably have some kind of logo perhaps for the program that then can be added to fact sheets, mailers, who knows, yard signs, social media posts, whatever it takes to get people to register. So here is an example. It's really rough, but the idea is the first time people are actually notified about well registration will be about mid-June. We want to send out a heads up postcard, and we want a call to action that FYI, starting July 1st, well registration 60-day period will begin. Presumably people understand that that's what the ordinance is calling for, and they've just been waiting for that date to launch. And again, contingent on MLJ's web portal being ready. We envision this as being something they can stick up on their fridge. There'll be a list of all the pertinent dates. including the ones next year, June 30th, 2027 for well metering and October 31st for the first biannual reporting. So just a tickler for them to keep on their fridge, and it will look better than this. Okay, then next in people's mailboxes will be the official notification to land in their mailboxes around July 1st. And it'll be a folded up trifold flyer, probably letter size flyer, with a unique verification code that each landowner will receive. And it's folded for privacy. But this is the starting point where they can then enter into the portal, use a verification code, and start the registration process. So this might also be from that same North Kings Fork example. MLJ, I think, produced this, and so I'm just using it as a mock-up for the moment. And finally, and this is pretty much my last slide, a schedule at a glance. You can see that the 60-day period is there in orange, and then the stars to the right indicate next year's deadlines per the ordinance 03. And all of our activities related to well registration pretty much are over by September, but we can always assess, the success rate, what percent of landowners are registered by the end of this campaign and our 60-day period. And then we can adaptively manage the remainder of our work plan to account for, any gaps, for example. But the lower gray bars indicating well metering and reporting workshops are really just a series of workshops that are spread out over time in advance of the metering. So they might be, it's a lot less of a lift, probably similar workshops, but we might adjust if we feel we need to continue well registration, for example, which we're hearing has happened in other GSAs. They had to extend the dates, but at any rate, that is our plan of action, and that's really my last slide. I do have my contact information on the final slide, but yeah.
Thanks, Eileen.
I don't think we got copies of that. Can we get copies of that deck?
I will provide this to you, to Charlotte and Dan, because I made last minute tweaks from the version they got earlier today. So I apologize.
Oh, digital. No. We can make digital copies of that presentation available on the website. Yeah. That was a request. Sure.
Are we jumping ahead, sir? And this is more maybe to the board than necessarily to, Mr. Kaka. To have 60 days in July and August to register your wells is not ideal. So I think we're gonna have to either extend it, maybe even to 120 days. Because yeah, some farmers, they're still, busy, doing their stuff. But I know ranchers, from January 1st to the end of June, we were busy, and then July and August, we're gone, And maybe that's not true for everybody, but, yeah, I think that if we want to be realistic, we need to extend that.
Is there, that's easy to do. Right?
Yeah, so this is a schedule that that Eileen and her team developed based off the adopted dates in the ordinances, which really the primary adopted dates are the well metering deadline of June 30th, 2027, and the reporting of October 31st, 2027. We had requested that they front load the registration, to get that done well in advance of getting the metering just because we knew it was gonna take time. And what we've learned in other basins is that registration process, to Mary's point, is not gonna get done in 2 months. It drags out. I think we got an example, the Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency extended their deadline twice potentially, and they're still only at 35% registered, so. And that's, and they're not alone. I mean, many other agencies are in the same way. And I think, Eileen and her team does have some interesting strategies where other basins have been able to just higher percentages. But yeah, that's great input. We have flexibility here. This is one of the reasons we wanted to get this in front of you today. Hey, to let you know, I mean, you might get a postcard here soon, according to the schedule, or if you want us to make adjustments to the schedule, we can take that input now, because we are not scheduled to see you till the end of July.
Well, is there a mechanism where we can just, so you had mentioned two things. We need a mechanism to extend, but having a strategy to capture the stragglers or the non-participants sounds like it needs to be built into the plan. Yes.
But the non-participants are still getting billed by the satellite stuff, and hopefully that's an initiative for a lot of them. Their wells will be more accurately metered when they're actually doing now.
To buy the meter, don't they?
Yeah.
But luckily, that's not until July of next year that has to be in. I think this needs to start as soon as possible, so I'm actually happy to hear that the portal is gonna be open in June. And maybe we're just not gonna be aggressive about, oh, you didn't get in by August 31st, we're charging you. But I do think that it's July and August are really hard times to assume that people are going to
They're working.
they're either working or they're on vacation. Right? I mean, people are on vacation. And there's gonna have to be a communication between the landowner and the farmer, right? Because a lot of farmers don't actually own their land. And so, and granted, is the landowner that probably knows more about what's down hole and all that, but I just think July and August is difficult. And either we extend it or we just aren't very mean about people that are strict.
I think we need to incentivize rather than punish. So, and to your point, Mary, it sounds like we have examples and patterns of, non-participation or not very fast adoption. So we should anticipate that. It sounds like.
And what's interesting is you say we should nonetheless start early.
Yeah, I think we need to get this out there as soon and as much as possible. Especially if we really want wells to be metered by next July, because we need to give them that year of buying the meters. Is there gonna be we've got a lot of wells ourselves, so, we have to budget for the meters, and then, there's only so many people that actually can install the meters, so we're gonna need a full year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any incentive that we can offer for early response, any programs that the county does that they could take advantage of, a rebate or anything that would, give them the carrot?
What does incentive look like?
To make it as easy as possible.
Well, so one thing that we were brainstorming with the team here was, one incentive is, Director Joseph's point, we're gonna bill you either way via the satellite in the sky. And if you want to get billed by another mechanism, the meter is probably your best mechanism to do that. It's the most accurate method that you have. So one incentive is that if they register and get a meter, they can then, appeal the charges or start reporting. There's not a huge incentive. At one point, there was a county program for meters, right?
There is a county subsidy program for installed meters. Yes, so in fact, I was gonna offer.
Does it expire?
That's the carrot.
Does it expire at a certain point? Because that's the other, right?
I put in my budget annually. We're actually just getting uptake this year for the first time mostly from Carpinteria and San Antonio, but it's really starting to ramp up. So it's in also in my budget. Supervisor approve it next month. It'll be in the budget for next fiscal year. And we anticipate keeping it going as long as there's demand for it.
It's capped. I'm just gonna ask that question. So is it sort of like first come, first serve and you're guaranteed participation and, or if you're, late next year, it would most likely be depleted? Is that how it works?
Each year does have a specified budget. We have yet to spend 10% of that budget in any given year. It's significantly overestimated. The subsidy is only $500 for tax purposes. So it's not most of the cost of a meter, but it is something. So no, I don't anticipate ever bumping up against caps. Now, if folks want to worry about caps and apply earlier, that's great, but.
Want to say first come,
Yeah,
first
you
served.
want to say, yeah.
But you gotta be integrated in with these folks that are
Yeah.
doing the work packages and sending it out. And so they need to be able to be cognizant of this program. And so that information needs to be in the postcard. That if you respond quickly, you're gonna be eligible for this subsidy, which will defray a lot of your costs.
And
So
500 is-
now you get a good response from.
Absolutely. In fact, I was able to
So I think they do that before they go.
that this isn't coming back to the board till July. We haven't had as much communication between GSA staff and agency staff, but I think this is a good opportunity to bring, I'm not gonna speak for my other agencies, but I'll volunteer water agency time to help out any way we can. Sure, the conservation district can help with communicating with 60% of the basin. ID1 has communication with a lot of people in the basin with wells. So I think this is a good opportunity to bring staff in, help with materials, whatever it is, get stuff on our websites. And we're willing to do it.
Is it 500 per meter? Or per individual, whatever?
Per individual. So yeah, so if you have 15 wells on a large property, it's not as much. Yeah, there's tax reasons the county and county capped it at 500 per person.
Something. What I'm showing here back on this slide is that, on the website, we have FAQs. And it might be good to show the incentive. I think that's great feedback from the board tonight to hear that an incentive versus, the punishment would be the preferred method of of encouraging well registration. So knowing what the incentive is, the sooner we can know that, the sooner we can message that. We may not have it in time for the FAQs and the website to be updated in about 3-4 weeks' time, but certainly by the time we're in the well registration period, having the public meetings, maybe it's, announced there, or in advance of the public meetings, but.
I think we already know it's 500 per parcel or landowner. Can't you coordinate
Well,
now and get that on
let's
the phone?
facilitate a connection so that,
Yeah.
Dan, can you facilitate it? That these two groups get connected so they have the data or the information?
Yes, yeah, we can, maybe you can send us a link, there's something on the county webpage.
Yeah, we can talk.
If you can send us a link, and then, yeah, we'll coordinate a meeting with staff representatives to talk about other collaboration efforts. A couple of things,
I'm sorry, I think that link to that website was on the well metering presentation that was put in last year.
perfect.
Go ahead.
The 60 days is hard coded into the ordinance. Hard coded, it's included. I mean, obviously we can amend that, just for reference, but there are no specified penalties, I believe, in the ordinance. The language around non-compliance gives the penalties or other remedies, it may be determined by the GSA board of directors. So you guys are in charge of any sort of penalties or incentives, well, more on the penalty side, at least according to this ordinance. So while it is 60 days, we can extend that, or we can just not penalize people if they don't register within that.
So we didn't consider that when we built the ordinance. I think we needed to extend.
I don't know that there was any extensive specific language, but you did include the provisions for penalties at your discretion.
Mine said it. Yeah.
So,
The mailers that are gonna go out in mid-June and July 1st, they're going to the same mailings that, the property tax went to?
Yeah, we were just talking about that today. We were thinking, so the property tax went to every parcel in the EMA GSA. And as you know, that was prescribed, by certain legal interpretation. We were thinking that we would try to not streamline, but pare down, like, at least not send mailers to people that we know don't have wells. And I guess the only real primary example of that we came up with was city of Solvang residents probably don't have wells, and we reached out to the city staff today. I mean, the city likely has records of who would have wells within their city limits. So we could not send to those thousands of people and confuse them and get lots of questions when, we can say with pretty good certainty that they don't have wells. But probably outside of that, it would go to all of the parcel owners. Was the thought, because we have, through the groundwater extraction fee, Charlotte did an extensive satellite imagery search, and that's how we've identified who gets the groundwater extraction fees. But for something like this, we probably should send it to everybody so that they can tell us they don't have a well, not just our interpretation of a satellite image that they don't have a well.
Put that on the postcard, though. This doesn't apply if you don't have.
Yeah, you don't have a well.
People don't. call
That's a
you.
great idea. I want to add that. Does not apply if you don't have a well. I just wanted to mention, Dan, Nate and Charlotte heard this too, but I think this custom mailer, they want to try and send just one per person who might own multiple parcels, but likely one well. So the MLJ is trying to bundle so that the well owner is only getting one and not per parcel, not getting a mailer per parcel or a verification code per parcel, I think. So we can verify that with MLJ, but hopefully it's streamlined.
Yeah, good clarification. I think maybe the first one goes out to more, the second one. I think the way the systems works, you have one login for all your parcels. So, we don't necessarily need to send a unique login to a property owner that owns multiple parcels, so we can try to be efficient there.
is there anything for people that don't use the internet? There's people out there that they're not high tech. You send something, they're gonna. And what's I know the workshops are gonna help that a lot. And then I suppose during the workshop, they can fill out information. We'll help them do that.
You want to speak to that, Eileen?
Yes, the MLJ mentioned in their prior workshops, there were people who didn't even have email addresses, which is also how you get registered, but they're able to help anyone. They were able to help anyone register. The workshops are meant to walk people through the registration process, and apparently you can do it from a mobile phone. So it's actually that user-friendly and accessible. You don't need a laptop. You don't need an iPad. Apparently most people are doing it through their phones or their mobile devices. Prior to the in-person workshops, we do plan to put on a virtual training webinar that will be recorded and be available on demand on the website. So anyone can check that out at any time and attempt it on their own. And the workshops will be live, kind of a help clinic for people who need help or they're stuck. So, or just encourage people to come in and just get registered all at once. So we want to be sure we provide all the information that they need. So they come with everything they need, all their documentation. We want to also put information in the FAQs so that it's clear, like the de minimis users, they can mentally put themselves in the category, well, yeah, I need to register my well, but I might not need to install a meter, that kind of thing. So we want to make the pathways clear for everyone in the different situations.
Yeah, just as long as we have some person-to-person contact, because I feel that could be some of the reason you have 35% not returning. And, yeah, the easier we can make it at these workshops for these folks, it'll pay off in the end.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
one instance we heard from another basin is don't invite everybody to show up at, I think we heard this from Carpinteria, and this is something that they developed, is don't invite everybody to show up at 2 o'clock and then have 300 people show up and have 3 people there to serve it, like schedule appointments. So that you can come in and get one-on-one service, and I thought that was.
That's great.
genius, yeah.
And then maybe a follow-up too, you know, if you get a good, you know, response and you can't meet all the people, you'll have something that, you know, to meet them right.
Kind of following with what Brad's saying, is there gonna be a phone number that people can call to, you know, it's like, I'm sorry?
To get walked through.
Yeah, kind of, or just to answer a few questions and. So you can only get so much off of a website or I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to actually talk to somebody.
Good
You
point.
suggested chatbot, but you already said they're not really technical.
No, I mean, yeah, sometimes you just like need to talk to a person
Yeah,
and it
need
takes
a real person on the
You
other
know.
line.
2 minutes, get your, so then you don't have to be so frustrated and all of it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I don't know, Eileen, is that part of the work plan and service plan? If not, maybe we could talk DWR about adding that.
It's not specifically called out, so yeah, we might need to add it as an amendment. And basically have a help desk, either email and or phone number. I don't know how that would be physically manned personally. I know we do need a way for people to get help. And we need a phone number that they can call. And I know your phone number is on the website. I've actually used it my first time wanting to reach out to you and I called it. So I know that exists and it works. I got a recording, but it works. So yeah, we need to figure out a way to provide the help people need in the form that they need it.
So I wonder if that's like phase 2, because you don't want everybody to default to the phone line, especially if you're not staffed. So maybe what we do is that's like strategy that you execute second round or after we find we're only 35% in the first 6 months. I'm picking numbers up, but that's a way to make it more, less burdensome and most efficient.
You know what I'd like to have, Dan, is you make a presentation to us and you instruct us board how to fill one out. Because then the people come to us and ask us, and I sure want to know how to fill that thing out. So I can answer that question.
I like that idea, but I think we have Eileen do that.
Well, that's good, but I really think that will be good for us. It'll be good for me, I know that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, I mean, and you guys are our ambassadors out in public, the CAG, others. I mean, yeah, it would be great if everybody that is consistently here is up to speed and can help their friends and neighbors through this process. Yeah, I think one of the success stories that we've heard about is people putting up lawn signs, register, like,
Right.
but
I forget which one at Kings or Forks, but there's 85% success rate at one of these other GSAs because they did three things that I'm aware of. They had social media posts that every time those went up, they had an uptick. Somebody had the idea to use yard signs, like political campaign yard signs, and then there'd be an uptick. And then they had a lot of public meetings. So those three things are getting them to 85%. Not to mention, I think the ease of use by MLJ's watermark portal is also making it easy, but social media posts, yard signs, public meetings. And once, I'm hearing that a second, maybe 60-day period, maybe after we do a kind of an after action review of the first 60-day period, see where we're at. And there's an amendment to Ordinance 01 to allow for another period. Maybe that's might be needed, but we can revisit and like you said, Director, revisit where we're at and the tactics. So this work plan is all about adaptively managing and learning from, what happens out there.
Good. Any other questions, comments? Good stuff, thank you. Can we move on to item 7, which is considering next time and need for future regular meetings and special meetings. I think the first one up is our already pre-scheduled joint special meeting on June 12th.
Do we have agenda for that?
I need to connect with the CMA, plan manager, but talking with the WMA, from my perspective, I don't think we have an agenda for that meeting, so I, unless this board has a strong opinion, I think we cancel that meeting.
Looks like we've got consensus here. Okay, item B, the next CAG meeting scheduled for June 18th. That's coming up. Over here. Okay.
Yep, so yeah, we intend on having that meeting, we don't have an agenda to fully develop for it yet, but I'm just planning to talk about.
All right. And regular board meeting, item C would be for us, the next targeted time is July 23rd at 4 p.m.
Yeah,
Good.
and I think,
Everybody's good? All right. All right, so that's settled. Item number 8, Board of Directors reports requests for future agenda items. Anybody want to?
When I'm through those meeting notes, listening and watching that, it's the first time I've really scrutinized it. CJ was on there and he brought up kind of during the CAG update. He had two items he'd like to address, and you were talking to him that you're going to bring them forward later, discussing the interrelationship of groundwater, surface water. He brought that up, and we've had information. I know you got information on that, and then he also wanted clarity on duplication of work that's being done by us. You said you're gonna work on that, so how you doing on those, or do you need to reply to CJ?
so on the first one, we really envision this well registration process is the great opportunity to cover this delineation of surface and groundwater. We have materials that were prepared as part of the action plan that, I think, and we're asking people to register, there's gonna be questions. Do I register with the GSA? Do I register with the Conservation District? Or do I register with the State Water Resource Control Board, the surface water diverter? So we envision that type of information from the action plan will get incorporated into these well registration workshops. So that's kind of what we've been planning on. So we haven't really done any additional work on that because I think largely that work's been done. And we just need to bring it to the people that
Bring
need
it
it
forward.
at the point that they need it, and we really think that.
Maybe that'd be something we could talk on it. on the next-
Yeah, at the workshop, I think that's one of the presentation topics, so,
Good.
yeah, so that would be a good one to share with Eileen and her team, just to make sure that's on their radar. Yeah, the duplication of work, we have not made a project on that. I need to look back specifically and refresh exactly what he's asking.
Yeah, listen to the tape or the video thing on it.
Yeah, yeah, we can, let me look back at that one and we can figure out, what they're looking for.
It'd be just good to address these issues that they bring up and those are not just not replying back.
I could feed in a little bit on that. I think what CJ was getting at was, we're paying Senator through the Water Conservation District, now we're paying the GSA also as groundwater inspectors. He was talking about why are we doing two things for the same purpose, essentially. For me, it's not a big deal, but I think that was the point.
Should the CAG kind of bring that up when you're reporting out to us then? Maybe bring it back to us in our July meeting from your June meeting, because I think that's one of the purposes of the CAG is for us to hear what those, sorry, go
I
ahead.
brought it up in, from the February. It was due to retain this team. Because of the boundaries of the conservation district, and some people are in that and,
Okay, so we're not taking it up then. So we've heard it twice now, we're not taking it up.
Well, the city must know.
Okay. Okay, got it. So Dan, I think that's maybe more clear direction for us. All right, any other requests, comments? All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna adjourn at 7:21.